Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The Salisbury couple had been married for more than 10 years. They met at a sporting event in Moscow. Both Adriana and Michael loved running. At first they did it for fun, but then they wanted to get not only pleasure, but also a reward. Therefore, even before they met, Adriana and Michael wanted the same thing: to win a running competition. They ran to the finish line at almost the same time. The man was only a couple seconds ahead of her, but decided to cede the prize to Adriana, as she was such a beautiful delight that he couldn't resist her to get the stranger's attention and get her number. He decided to give her the gold cup, and so began a romantic relationship between two strong and intelligent people. At first, Adriana and Michael's relationship resembled a roller coaster, then crazy passion, then cold meetings. But then a miracle happened, and they were able to find common ground, and their relationship turned into something beautiful. They learned what happy stability was, or so Adriana thought. Michael was unhappy with a lot of things about the relationship. However, he did not hurry to share his thoughts with his beloved, because he knew that it would lead to a scandal. The man was afraid that if he expressed his opinion, his wife would leave him. And she was the ideal for him. And Adriana was a tall and blue-eyed blonde with a lush bust, thin Italy, and pumped legs. They call them purses nowadays. And Michael was a skinny-eyed brunette. He looked much younger than his years. He was 35, and Alina was only 30. Harmony reigned in their relationship. For about 10 years, no serious quarrels, money sharing, and even jealousy. That is why Michael made an offer, and on their anniversary, the girl was very happy and responded with consent. But who would not agree to marry the person they love? The wedding they played lavishly. On the day of the wedding, Salisbury was practically the whole town. Everything changed at one moment when Adriana's legs suddenly started to hurt. It turned out that the girl had problems with her joints, and she was categorically not allowed to do sports, but she neglected it. As a result, and the line was to undergo a long and expensive treatment, to walk again without pain. The girl really hoped that her husband would support her during the illness, but Michael did not care. He constantly wanted a physical manifestation of love, and Adriana could not give it to him because she was ill. At first, the man wanted to divorce immediately, but then changed his mind. His wife had too many advantages, and he didn't want to share the business in the divorce. Michael hired the best doctors for his wife, but she only got worse. From time to time, the man thought about a mistress, but he was stopped by the thought that he could get some kind of infection. Venereal disease, or worse, he would have to pay for sex with a woman, and he didn't like hiding, ciphering, and deceiving others. So Michael decided to get back into sports. At first it helped him. His whole head was filled with useful exercises. He learned to run faster and began to prepare for the next competition. But after a month, the man began to be annoyed by domestic issues. His wife stopped not only sleeping with him, but also cleaning, and a little later forgot about cooking. Michael did not want to go into direct conflict with Adriana, so he began to look for a maid, who for an additional fee will also cook. The businessman could not live long without a home-cooked meal. At first, the man entrusted the search for a maid to his wife, but noticing what candidate she selects, he decided to do the search himself. At first, only elderly women, students, and inexperienced ladies with children came to his interview. But when the man specifically emphasized the age, things went much better in the questionnaire. In a week, the man managed to look through more than 200 questionnaires and stopped at 3. The first girl could do everything in the kitchen, but she could not cope with cleaning the house. The second candidate lied about her age and was not even 18. And the third girl was perfect. Tall, brown eyes, brunette named Betty, impressed the man not only with her references, but also stunningly outfits for cleaning. Michael immediately made the decision to hire a third candidate for the job. The businessman did not listen to the protest of his beloved. He brazenly stated that he had to hire additional staff because of her illness, not because of his own whim. Perhaps the businessman's choice was influenced by his emotional and physical hunger. When you have a gorgeous woman in front of you, and she is ready to fulfill all your whims, you begin to succumb to her charms willy-nilly. At first, Betty only cleaned and cooked. Michael didn't respond to her flirting, but the outfits became more and more seductive and spectacular. And Adriana occasionally joked that the maid is a little over the top and confuses work with a modeling agency. But the woman's illness began to progress, so she had no time to keep an eye on the new employee. Betty did not immediately like Michael. He looked quite decent. He wore an expensive watch on his hand. His body was dressed in a luxurious suit of blue color. The girl grew up in a poor family, and she always wanted to meet a rich man, but she had never met such a man on her way. Perhaps the problem was that the girl was always lost at work, and there was no time to go to expensive restaurants. And she never saw successful men in ordinary cafes. Initially, Betty was a very purposeful girl, but already closer to 30 and just bored with work. However, the girl evaluated herself and did not want to become an escort. Betty found a different way out. She decided to go elite maid. This job not only brings a lot of money, but also expands the circle of acquaintances. It is by working as a maid, you can meet a rich man in Moscow. After Betty got a job at the agency, she had already had 2 relationships with folders, but they were deeply married and were not going to change anything in their lives. So despite her love for money, Betty was running away from her rich suitors. At the first opportunity, she already wanted to become the wife of a rich businessman herself. Therefore, the girl changed employers every month. However, after 3 months, Betty was tired of running from one house to another, and her last hope was for a new order in the center of Moscow. But the owner of the house, named Michael, as it turned out, was also married. When Betty learned that her next customer was married, she decided to forget about her dream and began to fulfill her work duties in the hope of saving up for a car. The month was drawing to a close. The girl wanted to get a raise on top of her basic paycheck, and in order not to ask directly from Betty, used a proven method. She began to experiment with dishes, serving on the table only the delights of the kitchen, and the housemaid tried to wipe the house to a shine. It was with this that she won Michael over. Of course, he noticed how hard his new employee was trying and literally gave her $100,000 in cash. However, when the man learned that Betty was not going to stay for another month, he was very upset and began to think about how to dissuade her from changing employers. Nothing interesting came to mind, so Michael called his business partner, and if she is as wonderful in intimacy as she is in the kitchen, then I will definitely use all her services, Michael said on the phone to his friend Alfred from Sweden. His business partner and comrade responded to his ironic statement as follows: "Why do you need all this? Be patient for another month. Maybe your wife will soon get back on her feet. She is insanely beautiful. If you want to cheat on her, maybe you should get a divorce. Don't torture Adriana." Michael frowned and whispered angrily into the phone, "Are you even on my side or not? You know how long it took me to eat properly before Betty showed up. And I'm not talking about marital duty, and Adriana is just my eternal must." There was laughter on the other line, and after a brief argument, Michael and Alfred decided to change the subject. After all, they are about to sign another contract. It was Betty's last day at work at Michael's. She cooked a sumptuous dinner, laid out the dishes, poured the wine, and later cleaned up. She loved working in this house. It was rarely dirty. The man was clearly picking on his wife. He bore a line of brain for an hour from a single napkin lying on the table. Thank God I'm a maid and not his wife, Betty thought. The girl's musings were interrupted by Michael, who ran into the house and began quickly gathering some papers into a pile and taking pictures. The maid looked at the man excitedly and asked what's wrong. The businessman first brushed her off and then replied that his wife would soon go to Germany for treatment. Doctors at one of the hospitals promised quick results. In 2 weeks, Adriana would be healthy again, just like before. Betty's eyes lit up. Was this really the chance to get a rich husband or not? Though why would she need such a tedious spouse? After a short deliberation, the girl decided to leave the house and asked for the maid's last paycheck. I wanted to do the right thing and not to break someone else's family. But as soon as the girl tried to open her mouth and ask for payment for services, Sergei jumped up from behind his desk and ran to his office. Betty did not. Curious as to why the man had taken off so abruptly, she went to the door of his office. At first, some shouting and swearing could be heard, and then the man blurted out that he was so nervous about his lack of marital duty and hung up the phone. At that moment, Betty realized that she had to stay in this house for at least 2 weeks. Michael may be the one who is her chance for a happy and trouble-free life. When the man came out of the study, Betty had already managed to step away from the door and make an innocent appearance. The girl started a conversation with Michael about payment and at the same time complained about the problems with his office, asking to work another 14 days in his house. The man agreed, but asked the maid to stay out of his way during the negotiations and to keep out of sight. Betty was surprised that Michael reacted so coldly and angrily to her request, but decided to go through with it. For the first few days, Michael was hardly ever at home. The man celebrated his wife's departure and her future recovery. Michael had already changed his mind about cheating on his wife, but he was drawn to Betty like a magnet. After Michael hired a maid in his house, he began to have constant erotic dreams, in which Betty was always present in his dreams. The girl was always only in black lingerie and would kneel before him, begging him not to punish her for the broken vase. It was because of sexual hunger and frightening dreams that the man decided to go on a bender with his friends. He did everything he could to avoid seeing the insanely sexy brunette in front of him again, but he didn't want to fire her. Michael was afraid that he could at any moment lose control of himself and cross the line in their relationship, and this would not only destroy their marriage with Adriana, but also force him to show his true colors. Returning after another party, the man had a snack and went to shower, forgetting that he had a maid working in the house. A hangover sometimes knocks a person out of balance, making him forget about everything while Michael washed off his fatigue and the unpleasant odor of alcohol. Someone was already taking over his house. As soon as the man tried to get out of the shower stall, he heard a heartbreaking scream that was clearly coming from the pantry. The man turned off the water, threw a towel over himself, and rushed toward the room from which the noise was coming. Betty stationed herself in one of the rooms. I don't think Michael will be coming today. Everything went well at first. The girl undressed, and it was left to her to put on top of herself the official uniform of the company. But suddenly, the maid staggered back and leaned against the window. And then a pot of sand fell on her. Her first reaction to the falling pot was to scream. She spent mad money on one of the best molds in Moscow. It was hardly washable. The material was very delicate. The uniform cost as much as 3 of her shifts. That's why after the yelling, the swear words came out. The girl would have kept on yelling if the storeroom door had not suddenly opened. In front of her stood her employer named Michael, wrapped in a single towel. The man's hair was as wet as his entire body. It was on the cake that the most water droplets had accumulated. At first, Betty felt a slight wave of arousal at seeing a naked Michael, but then she lowered her eyes down. The girl felt ashamed of the situation. First the screaming, and now she was standing in her underwear near the broken pot. The situation couldn't get any worse. Opening the door, the young businessman expected to see anything but a sexual fantasy come to life in front of his nose. Michael made a remark to Betty about the mess and hurriedly retreated so the maid wouldn't notice his arousal. Sexual hunger was taking a very negative toll on the man's body. As he left the pantry, the man was angry with himself, for he wanted so badly to cheat on his wife right now. His body's desires were stronger than his mind. He felt like he was losing control and knew how this could turn out for everyone. When the potty incident was over, the work at the maid's office went on as usual until the evening. Already close to 20:00, the girl decided to come to Michael's office for payment. But as soon as she came to the office door, she suddenly wanted to play with the boss. The maid noticed in the morning that the man got excited when he saw her in her underwear, and she wanted to know how much he was attracted to her. Because of her ruined shape, the girl had to work all day in a red dress, but it was quite long. So Betty decided to make it a little shorter since the girl was studying to be a designer. Changing the length of her cape was not difficult for her. The cut, made with simple scissors, turned out to be quite beautiful. Walking into Michael's office after knocking, the girl asked for payment and then pretended to drop her brooch. Next, Betty erotically bent over and began to look for it. The man noticed that the maid's dress had definitely gotten shorter, but thought he was just imagining it. However, when Betty bent over, his heart began to tap away, and this time his patience broke. Michael approached Betty from behind and slowly slid his hand around her waist, starting to move lower, and then pulled the girl to him. The maid sighed loudly as she rose from her knees, removed the man's hands, and turned around to face him. It seemed as if Betty was about to slap Michael, for she was drilling him with her gaze. However, the girl suddenly drew him to her and drew him into a passionate kiss. With slow defections, the couple reached the bed. The businessman unbuttoned and removed Betty's dress in a couple of minutes and then threw it away. The maid, on the other hand, tried to delay the undressing process. She took off his jacket, then stretched his shirt for a long time, paying attention to every button. Already after 15 minutes, the couple had completely undressed and began to have fun on the bed. Michael was not on sit-in, and Betty, already after 2 o'clock, she asked him to stop. But suddenly, the man grabbed the girl by the throat and began to choke Betty, looking around and did not know what to do. The maid started to just gasp on the bed, and soon she just passed out. After coming to her senses, Betty looked around the room and noticed that Michael was no longer here, but there was breakfast on a tray and a note on the bed nearby. Betty was trembling with fear. It seemed to her that her boss was about to burst into the room and finish what he had started. Half an hour later, when the panic attack subsided and it was clear to the girl that no one was home, she quickly dressed and opened the note that was lying on the bed. It said the following: "Sorry, for last night everything was super on your part, but I don't know how to contain my emotions. I have aggression issues, but I'm working on myself. It won't happen again. I promise. I hope you don't go to the police, because my lawyers will deal with you pretty quickly. Kisses, Michael." After reading the note, the girl began to have mixed feelings. Her mind was screaming that she was looking at a psychopath, but her heart wanted to believe that it was just an unfortunate mistake. After all, a long abstinence and stress could well provoke such behavior in a man. The girl decided to continue the relationship with Sergei and tried no longer to provoke him to emotions even in terms of sex. Therefore, she removed all vulgar outfits from her closet. All 2 weeks, the couple practically did not get out of bed, and if they got out, only to change the place of rest. Betty even made it to Michael's workplace, but the lovers' happiness didn't last long. When before the arrival of Adriana was only 1 day, the truly beastly gut Michael again came out. The man asked the maid to come early to discuss the terms of her stay on the job. After all, Betty had only asked for 14 days, and they were almost over. The girl, naturally, asked the man to extend the contract for another month. Michael almost immediately agreed, but after signing the contract, he suddenly hesitated and said, "You can stay. But there is one thing." The maid proceeded and interrupted Michael, and then said, "If you're about your wife, then don't worry. I'm not going to tell her about our affair." Suddenly, the man's eyes warmed with anger. Betty, it didn't seem as if Michael was about to explode like a time bomb. But he pulled himself together and quietly continued his monologue. "No, that's not what I mean. If we're going to continue sleeping together, you need to know what I want. I don't want just sex. I want more violence, use handcuffs, belts, and more." At first, the maid was amused, but then she decided to clarify something. "What do you mean by a lot of other things? Not strangulation, I hope." The man smiled falsely and said, "No, of course not." "Betty, but was confused by Michael's answer. So she quickly picked up the money from the table and turned toward the door to make a quick exit. She practically reached for the handle when she suddenly felt someone holding her hair. After a couple seconds, the man dragged the girl to the back of the office, entered a strange combination on the safe, and a door opened in the wall. Michael then threw the girl to the floor. The hidden room went in himself and closed the door behind him. The hidden room was illuminated by dim flashlights, so it was impossible to see the surroundings. Although Betty resisted with all her might, Michael was stronger and did not let her break free. Once in the secret room, the maid didn't know how to fight off the man or where to run. She had already regretted 100 times that she had stayed in this house and decided to have an affair with her boss. Betty was beginning to realize that she was willing to do anything to survive, and if need be, she would kill the man in self-defense. Michael dragged the maid to the bed and lay down next to her. Tearing his clothes off, he tried to strangle her but was interrupted by a phone call. This time there were ghastly red marks on Betty's skin, and the girl felt that something was wrong with her neck. The girl suddenly realized that if she could escape now, Michael could easily be put behind bars. The injuries she had sustained should have been enough to file a police report. While the man was talking to his wife and Lena on the phone, the maid had time not only to assess her injuries, but also to think over a plan of escape. She saw a metal alarm clock near the bed and managed to grab it in her hand. As soon as Michael turned towards her, Betty hit the man with the alarm clock on the head after hitting and splitting his eyebrow. The businessman instantly lost consciousness. The girl checked her tormentor's pulse and made sure he was alive. She began to realize the plan to escape. Grabbing the phone, the maid stepped over the body of Michael, who half cut off the bed, and ran towards the door with the code. Checking the latest notes on her iPhone, the girl saw a strange combination of numbers. Then she used the code she saw to lock the system, and the door opened. It was through ingenuity and luck that the girl was able to escape. When Betty reached home, she immediately called the police, giving a statement to the interrogation. The girl hoped for the integrity of the police officers and did not alarm the media. But a week later, she got a call saying that the case was closed. Allegedly, someone saw how the girl had injured herself and blamed Michael for everything. It was clear that the businessman had bribed witnesses, but it was good if he cooled off afterwards. And what if he didn't? At first, Betty tried to forget about the boss assault incident, but her office was a constant reminder of all her past employers. Some clients don't want maids to work with. That's why apps are constantly advertising non-liquid employers. The blacklist of maids also included Michael, which is not surprising. And it's not as if Michael was just an app. After the strangulation, the girl began to notice that her neck ached incessantly and a terrible cough appeared. Betty decided to take a break from work and went to the hospital hoping to forget about the past. The doctor, after examination and tests, told the girl that she had displaced vertebrae in her neck, and to be fully rehabilitated, a lot of money must be spent. Betty, she was at a dead end. After all, she had just recently paid off most of her savings for a new apartment. It was the last mortgage bill. The maid made the decision to once again go to the authorities and sue Michael. She realized that if she won her case, her medical treatment would be paid for, so the man could not pay off again. Betty decided to find Michael's other victims and take statements from them. The maid was certain that she was far from the first girl Michael had attacked. Betty first of all decided to complain to the wife of the cheater, as she was sure that she must know more about him than the others. Adriana had only recently returned from Germany, but she was already glowing from the inside like a sunshine. Her legs were no longer sore, and she could even run on the treadmill. When she returned home, however, she was saddened by the fact that her husband did not greet her immediately. It was after a brief interaction with her spouse. It seemed to her that it was physically impossible for him to say hello. Her hunch was confirmed when she saw that on the back of Michael's head painted a bloody cut. Toward evening, Adriana decided to talk to her husband again after discussing his treatment in Germany. The girl decided to broach the subject of the incident in the house and started the conversation with the following questions. Honey, what happened to your head? Did you at least treat the wound? Why is the house such a mess? The maid was supposed to stay for another month. Michael made a cute face and quietly replied to his wife, "It's okay, just playing soccer with the guys. And Lekka hit me in the head with a ball. I'll soon go to the hospital and work there." And the maid turned out to be a piece of crap. I think you were right about her inappropriate behavior and begging for tips all the time. I'll send her away once and for all. Adriana was very surprised at her husband's reaction to the maid, for she thought he liked Betty very much. After all, he'd done all the candidates for her alone. But the wife was tired of wandering around hospitals and dealing with domestic issues, so she decided to take care of her beloved and said, "Come here, I will treat your wound, and then together we will go to the hospital and make you an X-ray." The man breathed a sigh of relief and smiled sadly. When his wife came to him, he immediately embraced her and said, "You've come at last." When the couple returned from the hospital, it turned out that the man had a concussion. She carefully put her husband to sleep and forbade him to work for the next week, while she herself reflected on the doctor's words. The doctor claimed that a sword wouldn't have left such a deep wound. It was clearly something sharp and metallic. The businessman's wife began to ponder why the man she loved had harmed her. But suddenly it occurred to her that Michael might have gotten into a bar fight and covered it up so she wouldn't worry. But Adriana's illusions about her husband's decency were dispelled an hour later. She received a call from Betty's maid and asked to meet at the cafe to discuss some terrible incident. And her main condition was to come without her husband and not to tell him anything. At first, Adriana wanted to wake up her husband and ask him what was wrong. But her intuition told her that first she should go to the cafe and discuss everything with Betty. That way, she could get to the truth. Opening her spouse with a blanket, the woman put on her favorite gray business suit and heels, then promptly advanced toward the cafe. When Adriana approached the coffee shop and went inside, the maid was already there. She immediately waved to Michael's spouse to get her attention. As she approached the table, Adriana noticed that the maid's neck was practically all blue, as were her arms. She felt uncomfortable, so she sat down on the nearest table and started asking the former employee questions from the get-go. "Why did you call me and ask me not to say anything to my husband? What good would that do you?" Betty smirked sadly and began his story. Adriana listened to her for about an hour, and she felt uncomfortable with the maid's story. She was desperate to justify her husband, so she asked another question, "And why should I believe you and not my spouse?" Betty skimmed her eyebrows and instantly replied, "Why not? Didn't he have something like this in his past? Think back, strain your memory." After the maid's words, and Adriana sank into her memories, Michael, in the first year of acquaintance, told her one terrible secret. During a vacation by the sea, the man told his beloved that in the past he had terrible outbursts of aggression. He strangled all his former women. And once as a student, he grabbed a prostitute so hard by the neck that she almost died, and then disappeared. No one could ever find her. When Adriana was able to get out of the memories, she decided to tell the maid the truth, not suspecting that the girl would want to put her husband in jail and take most of his money. And Adriana was so much worried about Betty's story that she decided to leave the cafe and be alone. The wife began to think about divorce. Of course, she loves Michael, but he's just been acting so disgusting for the last year, and the cheating and strangling story is just too much. Even though Adriana came from a wealthy family, she was scared to divorce Michael, especially after the abuse. She secretly called a lawyer and decided to gather all the documents as well as her belongings. And Adriana went to extreme measures so that it was possible to escape from her husband's lair without negative consequences. The maid, on the other hand, had recovered from the shock and acted rationally. She memorized the surname, first name, patronymic of a former girlfriend, Michael, and found her in social networks, and then arranged a meeting. as she did when she went to beauty salons on the internet. It was not difficult to pay for one trip to the masseur. All the more the girl realized that her efforts would pay off in a few hours. Betty and Kathy were already lying on the massage table. Near the end of the treatment, the maid spoke, and Michael's ex was shocked. After hearing the story to the end, Kathy decided to support the girl and help her by talking about her past and Michael. Back in college, when Michael was quite frail but insanely polite, Kathy fell in love with him. She had Caucasian and Russian roots at the same time, so her upbringing was very strict. She looked for a man according to certain criteria. Kathy tried to find a faithful, intelligent, and wealthy. And when she found one, she was overjoyed. Even as a student, Michael could throw money around. After all, his parents provided him with everything. At first, everything was fine in Kathy and Michael's relationship, but one day he quarreled with the teacher and he failed him, and then sent him for retesting. That was a day Kathy would never forget. At first, the girl thought it was strange that the man smiled at her fake smiles. Then he laughed at her sad stories, and at the funny ones. He almost cried that day. And towards evening, he simply attacked from behind and began to strangle Kathy. Then, very much frightened and barely broke free. What scared the girl the most was that when Michael let go of her neck, he looked indifferent and empty. It was like, if I died, he wouldn't care. Betty finished her story, puzzled by the girl's inaction, and asked, "Why didn't you go to the police?" Adriana sighed sadly and answered, "I was afraid of the judgment of society. I wasn't supposed to date a Russian. And then this happened. My father would have killed him." Betty tried to digest the information and continued, "Did you hear about the missing prostitute, Kathy?" She nodded and answered, "Yes, I had, but I was sure before you told me that it was just rumor and speculation. Now I don't know what to believe. There was a girl at our university, so to speak, of easy behavior. Not that she worked unofficially, more for fun. She helped our guys get rid of their fears and perverted fantasies. So in her 20s, she'd had a taste of everything. It would have gone on like that if she hadn't met Michael. One day at a student party, everyone gathered and celebrated Russia Day in the dormitory. Then Michael got alone with this Christina, and the next morning she was found unconscious. Her whole neck was bruised and cut. The guys ran to call an ambulance and the police on the street, because in the dormitory at that time the connection was bad. Or maybe there were some plugs. Having called the relevant services, the guys returned with a calm soul, but her body was missing. Whether she's alive or dead is still unknown. Many were convinced that Christina simply woke up and ran away. Allegedly, she was ashamed. Betty was horrified to hear the story and could only squeeze the following out of herself. "It's brutal. Do you know the girl's parents? Friends? I really need to find witnesses for a rape case. He's bribing the police. If I don't find Christina, you can come forward." Adriana nodded and whispered, "Yes, I'll help you. But it's important that my identity is not revealed until after the trial." A few weeks passed. The maid had already tracked down a few witnesses, but she wasn't sure of their reliability. But all the stories of the girls she'd interviewed pointed to one Michael as a maniac. It was only a matter of time before he snapped and escalated his aggression. And in 3 weeks, she managed to pack up all her belongings and documents and smuggle them out to a new home. She was lucky. When her father found out what kind of monster lived with her daughter, immediately started looking for a new place to live and found it, and then bought it for his daughter, formalizing it for himself. The woman decided to announce the divorce over the phone, but fear and excitement before the conversation did not go anywhere. Calling Michael at work, she began the dialogue. "First of all, hello. We need to have a serious talk with you." The man was surprised by the serious tone of his wife, but did not pay much attention to it. All because after the girl came back from the hospital and her behavior was quite strange, it felt like she was just avoiding him. Since Michael was busy at work, he replied like this, "Hello, my love. What's wrong with you? You're sick again." The girl rolled her eyes as she sat on the new bed in her house and irritably continued, "No, I'm not sick. You see, I don't want to be with you anymore. I think we should get a divorce." Suddenly, laughter was heard on the line. Michael thought Adriana was joking. Their marriage was perfect. If it wasn't for the girl's illness, there would be no problems at all. Therefore, he issued the following text after catching his breath. "Today, what's April 1? Nice prank, but let's get down to business. I'll come to work to get dinner on the table. By the way," and Adriana was dumbfounded by the insolence of her husband, but realized that it was a defensive reaction. That's why she replied like this: "My dear husband, I filed for divorce today. I'm not kidding. And this is no joke. I hope that you will be able to let me go quietly and without scandal." Suddenly, the man was seized by rage, and he abruptly threw a few phrases into the tube. "Then your things will be in the garbage tonight. No more scandals. You won't get a dime from me." Adriana surprisingly did not react to the threat and continued, "I have already taken my things and documents. Bye." After these words, the girl disconnected and put the phone away. Michael was furious. After one time, he was so seized by emotions that he decided to take revenge. First of all, he aimed at the secretary and decided for himself that tonight he would have a stormy night. And after that, he will take care of his already ex-wife. Inviting the secretary Anna home for a cup of tea, he took advantage of her trust in him and slipped her Aphrodite. So even before the action of the means, the girl began to flirt with the man and pulled into bed. After a stormy night, the businessman still could not calm down. After all, he was abandoned by 2 girls in a month. Thinking a little, Michael realized why his wife had run away so abruptly. His eyes were gushing blood. He grabbed the sleeping woman and started strangling her in his head. The picture loomed as he strangled the maid, and she died. Anna suddenly opened her eyes. Her neck ached, and she was desperately short of breath. She tried to push the man away, but she couldn't succeed. It seemed to her that this was the end. At this point, Betty had already filed a police report with the rest of the victims. A few days later, the report was accepted and an investigation began. The criminal case was influenced not only by the testimonies of several girls, but also by the disappearance of Michael's secretary. After the employee spent the night with her boss, she was never seen again. Her parents filed a missing persons report because she was going to visit her supervisor, but never returned home. Betty rejoiced and cheered. After all, the victory and the cherished money were very close. However, it seemed strange to her that the man always controlled himself and then took and killed a girl who worked in his firm. It was not logical or prudent for a successful businessman, but her heart this time said it was possible. The fact is that he is just a psychopath and does not know how to control emotions. While the former maid was pondering Michael's motives, he was sitting in an interrogation and proving his innocence. "I don't deny that I overdid it with Kathy when I was a student, but she forgave me. And the maid put an alarm clock to my head harder than I choked her. I even have a certificate, and the other exes here have testified to revenge violence. Yeah, I love those S&M showers, but I warned a lot of people about this beforehand. As for Anna, I didn't kill her. I'm not stupid enough to take a fall at work. Everyone knew she was coming with me. Why would I do something like that?" Justified Michael. The investigator looked at the man carefully and continued asking questions. "Who told you that the girl was killed?" "She was just put on the wanted list. But for the attempted strangulation of other women, you will have to answer one way or another. It's either jail or probation with restitution. A lot depends on your lawyer and your sanity." The man put his hand to his forehead, wiped his face, and quietly answered the police officer. Yeah, I got it. I'll reimburse them for all the damages. I'll give them the money. I'm not going to run from responsibility, but you need to let me go. I got a lot of work to do. I have to pay them back somehow." The investigator tapped the papers on the table irritably and threw a few sentences. "We'll let you out in 2400 hours, but until then, you stay here. If we don't find anything in your house, we'll let you go." As soon as the investigator came out of the interview, Michael mimicked the police officer by repeating his last line and grimaced. The investigator was sure that Michael was not involved in Anna's kidnapping and possible murder. But all the evidence and testimonies do not work in his favor, especially since in the past one of his acquaintances had already disappeared, and after that 2 more girls with whom he secretly almost cheated on his wife, but did not have time. About the latter knew only the employees of the department. Conducted a search in the house of Michael, did not give anything to the investigation, so the man was released on his own recognizance, pending the outcome of the investigation. Everything was quiet and calm until the trial. Before the start of the trial, Michael caught up with Betty and the victims to say the following. I realize that I have done wrong in the past. I regret that I tried to hurt you and that I did not get treatment for my outbursts of uncontrolled aggression. I signed up for therapy. I'm trying to change. You don't have to ruin my life. I'll pay whatever it takes. I don't want to go to jail for a murder I didn't commit. His eyes filled with tears. Looking at Michael, the victims began to doubt that he was involved in Anna's kidnapping, but not Betty. The girl had mentally made up her mind. For her, Michael was guilty, and that was it. Betty looked at the businessman and answered for everyone. I don't know how I can let you go after all you've done. At first I only wanted money, and now I dream of putting you away. Your secretary is missing, and I can't trust you anymore. Maybe I'll take the case to its logical conclusion, and you'll finally go to jail. During the trial, Adriana walked down a winding road, wearing a black suit and falcon heels. After making a couple of laps, the girl walked down a garage cooperative in the woods. Going inside one of the garages and closing, Adriana took out some plates and mugs. She filled the plates with food and the crumbs with water. Then she stepped back, opened the basement, and turned on the lights, put the dishes on the tray, grabbed it, and began to slowly make her way downstairs. As the girl slowly made her way down the stairs, not only could you hear the unpleasant consciousness, but also the mooing of the women sitting on the chains that were in the room. Fully descended, and Adriana looked around at her nieces and laughed, saying, "Time eat up, darlings. I'm sure you've already made friends with the new girl. Her name is Anna. She was Michael's secretary, and she really enjoyed sleeping with him." After feeding, Adriana was about to gag the last one, but she wouldn't let her. At first she just asked for help in screaming, and then she became attracted with Michael's spouse. You're a sick psychopath. You realize Michael doesn't need you. Why you're kidnapping women? Why do you keep me here? I don't give a shit about your husband. I was only trying to warn you. I slept with him before you two even officially met. And she looked at Christina carefully and spelled out every word and phrase. Listen to me carefully. When I first started dating Michael, you came running to me with pity stories about him being a strangler. I told you I wasn't interested, but you wanted support. You started urging me to file a complaint against your beloved husband. After all, you poor thing, you had to hide from him for months like you were afraid to. And I didn't care if you were the one coming on to me. Michael was mine. And I liked him before I met him. I saw him at university and I loved him at first sight. And you made him dirty, you ruined him. I had to put up with so much because you don't know anything about love. He loves me. He hasn't even strangled me once. That proves the fact that I'm the love of his life. And you guys are just doormats. I was sure I wouldn't forgive cheating. So I protected our marriage many times from this. But in the case of Betty, I failed. Unfortunately, I can't bring her here yet. But someday her corpse will be lying here. And if she misbehaves, I'm sure that if I can tell my beloved husband the truth about myself, and he confesses to me about the cheating and strangling, our marriage can be saved. Christina grimaced at the words, and Lena, beginning to realize that in front of her is a psychopath that cannot be cured, and spat back, "Yes, you're the perfect couple. I can't argue with that." Strangler and face snatcher. Adriana smiled wickedly and added, "Wait, it's not over yet. Our new girl, Anna, may have to be killed. After these words, Michael's wife taped Christina's mouth with duct tape and climbed the stairs upstairs. The girls won the trial, but Michael's lawyer didn't waste any time either and got him a suspended sentence. The businessman exhaled and calmed down as he left the courtroom. But then Betty flew up to him again and started talking. "You're not getting away from me that easy. You have to answer for killing that girl. You're a maniac." The man became sad again and answered, "I'm not a maniac. Do you understand or not? I'm going to the clinic, and I don't care if you believe it or not. Move aside and let me pass already." The girl blocked the man's way and continued, "No, I'll go to the media. No one will want to work with a maniac. Everyone will find out, and even your wife." Michael felt anger rising to his heart. He wanted to wring the girl's neck, but he pulled himself together and said, "Listen to me carefully. You're a fool. Buy if I want. It is you no one and nowhere will not take. And about my wife, she is no longer my wife. And it's all thanks to you. I've already realized that you're the one who told her, all kinds of nonsense." She filed for divorce. Betty calmed down and shut up. Realizing that it was useless to prove anything to the former teacher, the girl decided to take revenge silently, so she turned around and left. A few weeks later, Betty went to the media and told the horrible story of how the maniac was released because of insufficient evidence. After that, the Maid even went on various shows. On each of them, she described in color what it was like to work in the house of a maniac. Michael began to have problems at work. A lot of people started canceling contracts with him. People really believed that the businessman was a maniac who could buy his way out of jail. The man ordered disproving articles and then also began to star in the show. But it didn't help. He was recognized on the street and thought to be a murderer because of the media's delusional articles. Anna's parents also kept up with him and continued to sue him. After all that happened, Adriana realized that it was time to return to her husband and support him. After all, he has already answered for his treason. It remains to tell him his secret, and their love will blossom again as before. Before going to her husband, the girl again visited her nieces and this time decided to have a longer conversation, not with Christina, but with Anna, who worked at Michael's secretary. After Anuta felt that her mouth was no longer covered by Scotch tape, she rejoiced and tried to take a full breath. Then, with pleading eyes, she looked at Adriana and asked to be let home. She promised to disappear and not tell anyone anything. Anna only asked for one thing: to let her escape. Adriana smirked imperceptibly and replied to the secretary, "I am not angry with you as I am with Christina, but you slept with my husband. Therefore, you must answer for your deed. However, there is a good chance that you are the one I will let go. But before I do, I want to ask you a few questions. Sweet Anna, how good is my husband in bed? Why did he decide to sleep with you?" Asking the second question, Adriana took a knife out of her back pocket and ran the tip of it across the girl's face. Anna was horrified, but she said, "I don't know. That unfortunate day you called him and said something. I have no idea about the intimacy. I think he was more concerned about strangulation." After Anna and Adriana's words, things calmed down considerably. Then Michael's wife said the following: "That's right. I'm the one who announced the divorce. Yes, unfortunately, you were a victim of circumstance. I'll let you go soon, don't worry." Right after confessing my secret to my husband, suddenly Adriana started ripping the duct tape off each girl's lips and declared that she had made such an isolation that they could now scream forever and no one would hear them. After a few minutes, Michael's wife left food and drinks for the captives and then left altogether. But this time, she decided not to turn off the lights in the room, as she realized that it was quite likely that one of them would soon die of exhaustion. Leaving the garage and getting to her car, Adriana got behind the wheel and pulled out her phone, dialing her husband's number. She started the first conversation. "Hi, Michael. I need to have a serious talk with you again. I've missed you. And there is one thing we should discuss in private. Michael was very surprised to receive a call from his almost ex-wife, so he picked up the phone without delay. And after hearing this, he said, "Of course, Adriana, I'll be glad to see you. Soon we will be divorced, but I missed you too. If anything, I drink cognac at home. Come on over." Then the man passed out and continued watching the horror movie, drinking alcohol. Adriana found herself outside his house. After an hour she knocked, and when no one opened, Adriana just used an old key and went in. Passing into the hall, the girl noticed that her husband was asleep. A bottle of cognac is standing next to him, and a horror movie is on the laptop. Adriana smiled sadly. Once upon a time, they used to watch movies together and fall asleep on this bed. They used to be the perfect couple. The girl cleaned the room and then walked over to her sleeping husband and covered him with the blanket again. After a little thinking, Adriana undressed, threw on her old robe, which was left in the closet, and lay down next to Michael, and then also fell into sleep. Michael woke up to a foul odor. Was it just him, or was someone cooking his favorite pie in the kitchen? Looking around, Michael noticed that the hall was cleaned up and his laptop was turned off. Suddenly, the man dropped a single word, "Adriana," into the void. His wife came into the room and replied, "Yes, darling, I am here. I know you need support right now." The girl further held out a pie to her husband, sat down next to him, and gently rubbed his head. Michael was very happy that his wife was home again. Everything was fine. As before, he was afraid to scare Adriana away, because everyone had stopped talking to him after the shocking news on TV. So he whispered, "Thank you." After the parade dined first, Adriana spoke. "I didn't come just to make you a pie. We really need to talk." Michael didn't realize what else his wife could say to him, so he answered her, "What exactly do you want to talk about?" "Adriana," he smirked and continued, "I know you didn't kidnap anyone just because I did." The man choked on the water he was drinking. And then Michael looked at Adriana with surprised eyes and said, "It's a strange joke." Suddenly, Adriana grabbed his face with her fingers. She stroked her chin and, in a serious tone, said, "I've ever made a joke in the last 10 years of my relationship with you. I'm not joking." At first, the victim was a college girl who everyone thought was a prostitute. When we started dating, she wanted to report you. I only did it to protect your reputation. Then I came across 2 others. Is that how you looked at them? It was obvious you might have cheated on me, and I saved our marriage. But the Anna situation was as much about revenge as filing for divorce. I think you need to come clean about some of the things you've done. Then we can rebuild our relationship, and everything would be just like it was before. Michael felt the ground swim away from under his feet after Adriana's revelation. His head was spinning, and he felt as if he were about to faint. Despite the fainting, the man replied to his wife, "My God, why did you do that? At least they're alive. Where are you keeping them?" Before Adriana could hear the answer, the man felt weakness in his body and fell back into bed. When he woke up, a few hours later, the man noticed that he was tied to his bed. The businessman also noted that he was wearing only his underwear. He just wanted to scream help, but suddenly the music came on and Adriana entered the room. In one hand, she held a knife, and in the other, a glass with cognac. She quickly listened to the glass and put it aside on the nightstand, and then climbed on the bed and sat on top of her husband. Michael was shocked, and for a second, he even thought he was paralyzed with fear. Strangely enough, there was no aggression towards his wife, perhaps because of the treatment in the clinic, or maybe from shock. The man, coming out of his thoughts, noticed that the girl was wearing a leather suit. Realizing that something wrong was going on, Michael tried to get through to his wife's mind. "Honey, I don't know what the women you kidnapped told you, but that's not what I wanted. I realize I've made a lot of mistakes in my marriage, but you can't kill me. Please just let me go." Adriana laughed and replied, "Stop it. Why kill me? They didn't kill you and I didn't kill you. I love you, darling, and I want you to tell me all your secrets. as a young girl suddenly took out a knife and began to run it down Michael's throat. Then she continued, "Well, tell me how you strangled them. Why did you do it? We need to save the marriage before it's too late." The man realized that his wife had just lost her mind. But how long it had been going on was unclear. Had he been dating a crazy woman all these years and then married her? Michael was determined that he needed to find out where the girls were in order to save them and his reputation. So he said, "I choked them out of aggression. All that recycling and a lot of alcohol. I'm cured now. You better tell me why you don't let those girls go where you keep them." After Adriana heard her husband's questions, she realized that this marriage could not be saved. So she lightly scratched her husband's neck with a knife and whispered the following in his ear. "Lenina, 12, Building 3, Garage 17. But I'll have to get rid of you too, just like them. But not today." Suddenly, Adriana got off her husband and untied him, and then slowly and quietly left the house. Michael did not dare to run after her and called the police, immediately telling the horror story about his wife and the kidnapped women. Initially, the man was not believed, but was obliged to check the garage. Police officers drove to the address, but when the garage door was opened to the operatives, it became clear that there were no kidnapped women. Michael was issued a ticket for false summons and asked to go to a psychiatric hospital, and Adriana was not surprised that the man tried to turn her into the police, but she was hurt that he did not even think about her words and immediately began to call the authorities. To kill Michael, the girl did not want to kill Michael, so she decided to just drive him crazy and take away the business. In a few days, the divorce. She will be a free woman again and will find an even more worthy groom than the previous one. After all, she already has someone in mind. Michael realized that Adriana was just mocking him and had lied. The man did not know how to outwit the psychopath. In his head, there was only one idea: to hire a private detective who would follow her and report everything to him, despite the fact that spending the last money on such a specialist did not want to. There was no way out. So the man took a risk and dialed the number of a private investigator. At that time, Alfred returned to Russia from another country to save their joint business with Michael. On arrival, the young man set about launching an advertisement. He presented everything as if Michael was suspended from work. And the main thing here, that there was no bad name behind the company. He hoped that after the advertising was launched, the building materials could be sold in the same volume as before. The day of the divorce came. Adriana and Michael couple divorced quickly and without many questions. Coming out of the registry office, Adriana looked at her ex-husband, smiled venomously, and said, "You know, I did so much for you. I saved you from prison, and you immediately wanted to give me up. You were never worthy of my love." Michael decided not to say anything. After all, he was waiting for the results of the private detective's work and hoped to put the psychopath in jail for a long time. Suddenly, Adriana turned around and walked off in the other direction. After his ex-wife left, Michael stood in the driveway and hesitated whether or not to call Betty. If this stubborn woman could get to the truth and save all the kidnapped. After all, she has already once been able to unearth the truth about him, which means that she will be able to bring Adriana out into the open. At this time, Michael's ex-wife has already arrived at the garage near the forest and wanted to go inside, as suddenly found that she was followed by a clumsy old man. The elderly man pretended that the neighboring garage belonged to him. Or it didn't get funny, because this is where all the garages of hers are. She had bought the whole garage cooperative years ago. Adriana pretended to feel sick, then suddenly collapsed to the ground, feigning an epileptic seizure. The private investigator was frightened and ran up to the shaking woman. Adriana continued to play the role of the sick stranger and in a trembling voice stated, "See, there's a black Jeep. Inside it are my epilepsy pills. The door to the car is open. Just find my bag. But hurry up, please." The man only had time to turn around before he suddenly felt a severe pain in his head and fell to the ground, immediately losing consciousness. Behind his body stood Adriana, who threw the bloody stone out of his hands and shivered. Suddenly, the woman interrupted the silence and answered herself. "A private detective, I guess. Yes, Michael. You really don't have much money left." Adriana dragged the poor old man to the other girls in the basement and also said with a chain. When the kidnapped ladies saw the elderly man with a bloody head, they started yelling and screaming. Adriana got tired of listening to their screams and sharply reprimanded "Shut up, already alive. Stop yelling. Today you have a celebration. It looks like Anna is going free." All the girls in the room looked at each other in surprise and fell silent. After a minute, Anna decided to break the silence and asked Adriana the following: "What do I have to do?" "I hope you won't kill me." Adriana waved her hand and replied, "I am not going to kill you. I have a business proposition for you. I have studied the biographies of all the girls, and you are the smartest among them. So I am sure that you will make the right choice and not let me down." Finished talking, and Adriana approached Anna and silently took off her chains. Then they went upstairs together. A few hours after the divorce, the man was already at the bar and drank an entire bottle of whiskey. It was only after the alcohol that he felt brave and decided it was time to call Betty. He needed her help. At first, Betty sent Michael as soon as she heard his voice in the phone and blocked all his incoming numbers. But half an hour later, the girl received a text from him with the following content. "I know I look like a stalker right now, but think to yourself. We can meet in a public place and talk calmly. It wouldn't be profitable for me to kidnap women. What about hurting you? You see the way I'm gargled on every show. I want to talk to you because I finally figure out who's been kidnapping my exes. It wasn't me. Yeah, I liked strangling ladies, but not kidnapping. Believe me, I know you are the only one who can bring this thing to light." Betty was very surprised by the message she received. There was something genuine in Michael's words, and the text itself was desperate. However, her heart desperately did not want to believe him. In her head, the following text was spinning: "Just delete the message and forget about it like a bad dream. After all, you already got the money and cured your neck." While Betty was thinking about whether or not to help her former employer, a breaking newscast began on the television. The correspondent told the following. Anna found the girl decided to put an end to the story of the maniacal businessman. She stated that Michael Salisbury kidnapped her like the others. But one day he felt bad, and she managed to escape. Her parents still can't believe their daughter managed to wrestle the keys from the maniac's hands to run out into the street and go to the police. Betty was shocked at the news. After all, just now, the man had been calling and texting her. Is he really stupid enough to reach out to his former victims on the day one of the abductees escaped, or is someone skillfully setting him up? But why would the secretary lie? It was obvious that the girl, all their Udally, was a captive. After a short thought, Betty decided to meet Anna and then to visit Michael in prison. After all, now he really faces a big sentence, and no amount of money will not save him. At first, Betty couldn't get a hold of Anna. She knew her cell phone number and her work number because she sometimes came to work with Michael. Also, the receptionist would sometimes call from her cell phone herself and relay cooking-cleaning errands. Surprisingly, when Betty called the work phone, she didn't pick up the phone. The secretary was reluctant to say anything at first, but then told Betty a little pity story. Anna's story was full of inconsistencies, and it was unclear how the man had managed to keep a huge number of women on chains at the cottage and how he had managed to move them all to another place. Immediately after Anna's escape, Betty began to suspect that the secretary was lying. But why was she doing it? It remained to be seen. In order to find out the full picture of what had happened, the girl decided to call Michael, but his phone was out of range. So Betty changed her clothes and called a cab directly to the police station. When she arrived, the girl found out from the investigator that Michael is now under interrogation, and then he will be placed in a detention center. If Betty paid a little, they would be allowed to talk even before being transported to another department. The former maid was not greedy, so she agreed. After the man came out of interrogation, they were allowed to be alone in one of the department's rooms. I'll make the conversation clear right away. I'm not going to save you. I don't feel sorry for you either. But it's obvious that your secretary Anna is lying. Why would she do that? That's the question. I'm starting to doubt that you've been kidnapping girls. But then who are you to say I'm the only one who can bring this thing to light? Michael looked insanely tired. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and sighed disappointedly, and then answered, "It's my wife, or rather ex-wife." "Well, have you met her?" "She herself came to me before the divorce and said that this secret should restore our relationship and take it to the next level. Compared my strangulation to the kidnappings, said we had to reveal our secrets. I was hungover, feeling terrible. She shocked me with her revelation. All I could do was call the police, but she gave me the wrong address. I realize now that I was in a hurry, and it was all just a test. Adriana couldn't see if I could be trusted. Now she's taking revenge and trying to make me look like a maniac and a lunatic." Betty hesitated a little at Michael's words and looked intently into the man's eyes. It was easy to see the despair and sadness in them. Inside, the girl had a strong feeling that this time Michael could be trusted, so she said, "And how can you prove all these words? Can't you at least have cameras with a sound recorder?" Michael shook his head and whispered, "I've said the same thing several times already. I tell the cops first, and now you don't have any cameras. Otherwise, how would I be able to make love to you in the morning? She'd be watching me all the time. It wouldn't be a marriage, it would be a nightmare." The man paused briefly and then continued, "Only you can find proof that she's behind the kidnappings. You'll have to dig into her past. And then I'm sure we can find some leads with you. I told the coroner I hired a private investigator to follow her. And he disappeared too. But he laughed at me and told me I was just getting screwed out of money. That's a clue too. What happened to the nice old man I paid off? It would be very easy to canvass his acquaintances and find out if he was missing." Betty looked at Michael perplexed and said, "Why should I help you?" The man shrugged his shoulders and replied, "Well, you came here, so you care about these women. You've already stood up not only for yourself, but for others once. You can do that not for me, but for them." Betty smiled and said thoughtfully, "That's manipulation on your part, of course. But you're partly right, the girls need help. I'll check into Adriana's background, but a little later. And by the way, before I go, answer me one question." The man was pleased that Betty had agreed to help, but tried not to show it. After a brief silence, the man asked what the question was. Betty made a serious look on her face and continued, "Why didn't she kidnap me? Why did she lock everyone in a back room somewhere, but not me? Why would she tell me about your exes?" The man laughed and said, "Well, it's simple. She thought the affair was all my fault. She was sick, and I hired a maid and slept with her. The others were all over me, but not you. Yes, no doubt you annoy her, but you haven't crossed her yet." After the last words, the girl decided to end her conversation with Michael and left the room. She still had to dig into Adriana's past and find out if the private investigator Michael had hired was missing. Thankfully, the man had given her the keys to his house. When they talked to the police and find out who the private investigator was, it was not difficult, nor was it difficult to determine Adriana's past last name. At this time, Adriana decided to set up her personal life. Her ex-husband was over and she was lonely. Therefore, Adriana began to act decisively. She met with a co-worker of Michael named Alfred and complained about the fact that she had wasted most of her life on a maniac. She also tried to console the man because his best friend turned out to be a psychopath. Alfred immediately believed Adriana because they had communicated before, and he always thought that Michael did not appreciate her, and Adriana was a beauty. She had 2 higher educations and was an excellent cook. What more did he need? Alfred thought. The answer lay on the surface. After all, it turned out that Michael was a maniac. Logically, such a woman would not be appreciated only by a psycho, and Adriana realized that Alfred would fall for her pretty quickly and was already counting on a new marriage. It remained only to think of a way to seduce a man, because in her house very much lacked male hands. So the girl said goodbye to Alfred, called a cab to the shopping center, and went shopping. What better than a beautiful dress and perfume can emphasize a woman's sexuality? That's right, nothing. Betty at that moment ran into Michael's house and took his laptop. As soon as the young maid put the device in her bag, she left the man's mansion and started hailing a cab. After arriving at her hometown courtyard and reaching her apartment, Betty felt her legs buzzing with fatigue and moaned in pain. A little from lying on the bed, the girl turned on her former employer's laptop and began searching for the information she needed. Michael's deal with the private investigator Betty found quite quickly through the browser history. Also, the girl immediately studied all the background of the detective with the help of a program that a friend from the computer club had installed for her. A private investigator named Rick never set up any of his clients. If he took on any case, he did not back down to the last. That surprised Vetu, so she ran him through search engines and social media. It turned out that Holland had indeed gone missing a couple days ago, and relatives were very concerned that the man wasn't in touch and his phone was disconnected. After Betty found out about Rick's disappearance, she managed to squeeze out only a few phrases. "Yeah, I don't have a lot of options. Either Michael and Adriana are a couple of maniacs conspiring to drive me crazy, or Michael kidnapped that detective and killed him, and then started telling me stories. Of course, there is a third option, which I don't want to believe, that his wife is really doing all this. But why?" Next, the girl had to find out Adriana's past, and it had to start with her last name. After 3 hours of searching, Betty found nothing and dozed off. And then came the next day. Betty had nightmares in her dream all night. Michael and Adriana turned out to be cannibals who were trying to eat the poor maid who didn't have time to make them lunch. After the girl opened her eyes, she first breathed a sigh of relief and then laughed. However, the search had to continue. There was no telling what else she would dream about this week. Betty decided to change the direction of the search and looked into the background of Adriana's parents. She finally found the last name of her ex-wife, Michael. Adriana used to go by the last name Babkina. At first, knowing the suspect's last name didn't help her. But suddenly, the maid had the idea to check her data with a broomstick, and it was the right decision. Later, it turned out that Adriana in the past regularly visited one medical institution. Mostly psychologists, psychiatrists, and neurologists worked there. Betty made the assumption that Adriana had seen a psychiatrist, which meant that the only thing left to do was to visit her primary care physician and find evidence of Michael's ex-wife's guilt. Betty felt that she was close to solving the mystery, especially when she was already standing on the threshold of the clinic. Gathering her courage, the girl went inside. Betty then asked the receptionist to call all the psychiatrists at the clinic. Allegedly, she was having a seizure and was on the verge of suicide. All the available doctors at the clinic came running to the screams of the crazy client. Betty went a little overboard in her portrayal of a psychopath. At first, she was talking nonsense, but at the end she added that she would only be treated by the doctor who had saved her friend Adriana. One thin and tall brown eyes, and the psychiatrist waved his hand, and then said, "Well, then stop yelling. You found someone who will save you. And so has Adriana." Betty was glad she had gotten her way and responded well. "And we can start the reception already." The man nodded and led her to his office. When they entered the small room and the door closed, Betty panicked. After all, she had a meager imagination, and the psychiatrist was clearly expecting a story from her. The girl remembered the latest movies about psychopaths and began to retell the plot from the movie. The doctor did not notice it and began to participate in the conversation. At the end of the appointment, the girl asked if the psychiatrist had lied to her. The man replied sternly that he never lies. Betty realized that the man would not tell her directly about Adriana's affliction, so it was necessary to keep him busy with something for a few minutes to look for her card in the office. The girl lied that she was allergic to the dust in the room and asked for an urgent search. The psychiatrist was scared for the patient's health and retreated to the front desk for medication. At this point, Betty started checking all the lockers and found a file on Adriana. Quickly stashing it in her bag, the girl sat down in her former seat and tried to hide her joy as best she could. When the doctor came back and gave her a pill, she defiantly drank it and went out into the common room. Then Betty quickly paid for the appointment by card at the reception desk, went down the stairs to the street, called a cab, and went home. When she arrived at the address and entered her apartment, she immediately threw off her outerwear, sat on the bed, took out Adriana's file, and started reading. Betty felt like a real detective. The girl felt as if she was starring in a cool movie. But her positive emotions were replaced by horror when she got to the information about Adriana's diagnosis. The girl's dossier said that she suffers from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and split personality. The most amazing thing was that all of these diagnoses had been checked and confirmed by an entire panel of doctors. She had seen about 5 psychiatrists prior to meeting Michael, and no one had been able to help her. On several occasions, doctors had noted that she refused to take her pills and was having terrible breakdowns. After reading the last lines in Betty's file, smirked and said, "Yes, you and Michael are worth each other. But I guess he didn't lie to me. Adriana is indeed behind the kidnappings of the other women. But how do I prove it? We're gonna have to follow her. There's a good chance it could end badly for me. Maybe I should just drop the whole thing and move far away to visit my parents, for example." The girl continued to think out loud. After a little rest and thinking, Betty decided to visit Michael one last time. The girl was sure that it was this man who should motivate her to continue the investigation. Or would she just leave town and forget about Adriana's dossier? At this time, the psychiatrist wanted to re-examine Adriana's file, as he was determined to understand why her friend had come to him. After all, he was the one who couldn't help Adriana. Neither could the other doctors. When he discovered the file was missing, the man immediately called his former patient to report the theft. "Hello, Adriana. A crazy woman showed up today claiming to be your friend. After the appointment, she stole your chart with your diagnosis. I realize we have to maintain confidentiality, but please don't sue us. Here's her last name, first name, middle name Betty." Adriana sighed irritably and replied, "Don't worry, Sam, it's true. My friend, just in addition to her neurosis, she's also suffering from Anna's clip. I'll take care of it myself. Thanks for letting me know." After that, the angry girl hung up the phone and started looking for her kidnap case, and after collecting the suitcase, Adriana called a lawyer and asked him to draw up some papers. An hour later, Adriana was already standing outside her garage. Park the car. She went inside and went down to the basement. The kidnapped girls, as well as the detective, lay in utter exhaustion on the floor. Seeing the disappointing picture, the girl laughed and said, "Shit, I forgot to feed you. But at least you have a private toilet, shower, and sink. I think you have been given the best accommodations." Suddenly, Adriana was silent for a moment and then continued, "Do you want to get out of here today?" All the girls nodded, but the man only managed to raise his hand a little. And Adriana grinned and began to talk about her offer. But who would have doubted that everyone would agree? "You must sign the papers I will give you on these papers. You have participated in a social experiment voluntarily. The essence of the experiment is that experts conclude in the course of work how long people can live in the basement on chains and how it affects their health, both physical and psychological. Of course, you will be paid for this. After all, the experiment was voluntary, wasn't it, my dears?" Everyone said yes. Adriana laughed again and remarked, "Your voices should be more joyful. Today you will go free." The teacher went around the room and held out pens to everyone. And then the contracts. When everyone had signed the contract, Adriana began to remove the chains from the girls and then got to the detective as well. 2 exhausted beauties under the hand of the private detective headed for the exit at once. But Christina did not want to leave and asked Alina, "I don't believe in your kindness. You're just going to let everyone go. Is this contract really that good for your rights?" Adriana raised her head proudly and replied, "Christina, are you really that stupid? Run away while you have the chance. Or do I need to renew your contract?" The teacher suddenly smiled predatorily. Christina looked at Adriana incredulously and threw a few last phrases, "And I'm already leaving. But my heart tells me that there's something fishy going on here. There's a reason why you were so quick to get rid of us." Adriana laughed again and said, "Do you want me to spare you a thought? I just found a new man. No more mistresses, only decent husbands." After the teacher laughed, Christina did not listen to her anymore and quickly went up the stairs to the exit. The next day came. Betty woke up in a great mood. After all, she had found out the truth, and now she would be able to save the girls, even if Michael didn't convince her to help him. She could always leave an anonymous message for the police. However, the girl decided not to watch TV today for nothing. After all, the television told what happened to the missing ladies. It turned out that they took part in a secret social experiment, and one of them is now fabulously rich. The same Christina is a student, moonlighting in the excursion, and became a millionaire. The whole point is that she took part in the experiment the longest. The others were only there for a couple of months, and she more than 5 years. The experiment was conducted by Rubicon, a company not registered not to Adriana, but to a certain Jack. After Betty dressed the bruised, born, she stuffed the phones, the dossier into her purse, and then headed for the police. She was once again lucky and was able to make an appointment with Michael at the department. When Betty and Michael were left alone together, a very amusing dialogue began. The first to speak was the girl. "Your ex-wife is really crazy. And it's well documented. I found her file. And you were right about the detective being missing. I don't know if I should pursue this case any further. I'm starting to realize that Adriana is a real danger to society. But if you pay me, I'll help you." The man laughed and replied, "Betty, haven't you seen the news? I'm in prison and I know what's going on." She released all the girls and the detectives too. He contacted me right after the escape, and Adriana made them all sign an agreement that they were in a social experiment. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't prove anything. She's got a rich family, and she makes good money selling real estate. And I'm about to be released too. Christina, my lawyer, accused me of slander. The girl claimed I was the one who kidnapped everyone. I'll be released in a couple days, and my father will give me my money back. But I'm not spending my blood money to get back at that crazy woman. I've had enough of her. I hope I can get my business back. But even if I get my business back now, I'll have to go to psychiatrists periodically for a long time because of the abuse allegations." Betty was stunned, and after a couple minutes she replied, "What am I supposed to do now? Forget about your crazy girlfriend. You should have thought about that a long time ago. Suddenly, you'll be normal." Having finished her speech, the girl grinned. From the recent events, Michael really changed inside and realized that he no longer wanted to show aggression. The man decided to make a fresh start after the clinic and prison. When he was accused of kidnapping, only Betty believed him. That's why he started to have feelings for her. Surprisingly, even the parents were sure that their son was a maniac, but not the former maid. Confessing his feelings, Michael was afraid, especially now, but he decided to take the hint. The man gently stroked the hand of Betty, who was sitting across from him, and replied, "Yes, I think you should leave Adriana alone. She's a psychopath, and probably has a narcissistic physical personality disorder. Take care of yourself and stay away from her. Maybe you should even go on vacation. I hope she doesn't find out you stole her file. Otherwise, Adriana won't just let you go." Michael paused for a moment and continued, "And if you need a friend or a man, you can always come to me. I'm grateful for your help, and I'll wire you as much money as you need as soon as I get out. Thank you, Betty." She was surprised to hear Michael's words, but she didn't show it, And noticing that the man grabbed her hand, the former maid freaked out a little and moved away from her former employer. After a moment, the girl calmly answered Michael, "Yes, you are right. It's better to leave the elite in the past. And about you, I don't think a relationship with you is a good idea." "Sorry." Betty finished her speech, gathered herself, and silently left the office, and Michael felt his heart shattering into hundreds of pieces. But he realized that it was deserved, and there was no point in stopping the girl. Already leaving the office, Betty felt her heart beating frantically. For some reason, she was drawn to go back, but she overpowered herself. The man was still attractive to her, but after everything she had been through, she couldn't trust him. Certainly not after the abuse. She didn't see herself as a victim, and she didn't want to get caught up in the Carmona triangle. And anyway, she was doing all this for the money, wasn't she? Walking out of the police station, the girl felt defeated, so she looked at her phone and explored the neighborhood. There was a cafe nearby. She decided to head there. It's about time to get drunk, Betty thought. After walking through the dense park, she was only a couple of meters away from the unfortunate cafe. Her legs were already tired. Betty mentally berated herself for not calling a cab. It was pretty dark outside, and the girl thought for a second that a shadow had slipped past. She reassured herself that she was tired, and it was only the branches of trees flickering before her eyes. Suddenly, she heard a crunch and felt a wild pain in her head, and then a fog. Behind Betty's body stood Adriana with a cobblestone, who was muttering to herself, "I'm so sick of you, stupid maid. I should have put you on a chain right away." A few hours later, Betty woke up in the basement. Her head was groomed, and an anti-sanctions band-aid was visible on her hair. Turning around was hard, and the girl began to realize that she had been jammed with some sort of hard object, perhaps a cobblestone, and then dragged here. After some thought, the maid realized that Adriana was probably behind it. Betty even felt like laughing at the silliness of the situation. Just when she had decided to drop the investigation, Michael's ex-wife had decided to silence her. Reflection. The girls were interrupted by a mouthpiece or some sort of speaker limited to the wall, which was hard to notice at once. From the device came a woman's voice. "But hello, beautiful. You're awake at last. I had to sit with you for hours. But tell me, why did you mind your own business? You could have lived happily ever after. And after the strangling incident, vacationing on an island somewhere. But no, you had to steal my file. If I let the others go, I'd have to kill you. I was forbidden since childhood to reveal my real name or I'd be disinherited. And you're stupid. Stupid. Do you think I want to kill you? No, but you leave me no choice." Betty found it hard to think and speak, but she tried to answer. "Kill for the last name. But you're definitely schizophrenic. I don't give a shit about you and your family. I'm sick of you. I wanted to release the girls, and that's it. But you let them go. I was the last to know, and I was gonna drop the case. But no, you had to silence me." Adriana went into a frenzy. No one had ever called her sick. No one knew about her diagnosis, and now she wanted revenge. But time was short. "I'll deal with you later. Leave you for my sheepdogs to feed." "Oh, you didn't know I had dogs. They've been all over the place lately. I think you'd make a great steak." After that, the girl turned off all her devices and went to seduce her new fiancé. Alfred won't be waiting long. After all, there are plenty of single women who want him. Betty was cold and scared, especially after the words about the steak. She remembered her nightmare about Adriana and Michael being cannibals, and she felt uneasy at the mere thought that the dream would come true. At this time, Adriana was asking Alfred to evaluate all of her new outfits. A black, short and ruching dress with a power cutout, as well as a purple one with a slit up the leg. Well, the last variant of the updated closet also demanded the evaluation of a transparent dress made of a special film. The man laughed when he saw the third dress. Yes, he was certainly crazy about Adriana and her looks, but modern fashion scared him. The girl was standing in front of him in almost nothing but lingerie, and of course he wouldn't want her to wear that. What if she wore it to a party? Then she'd have a lot of suitors. Alfred advised me to keep only the first dress, as it fit her perfectly. When the girl smiled sadly and pouted her lips naively, the businessman could not stand it and ran up to his seductive. He then grabbed Adriana and pulled her to him, starting to kiss her lips greedily. A few days after the Passion Night, Alfred and Adriana Michael were released from jail. He felt great, free at last. Now it was possible to drink cognac at any time of the day or night, and to socialize again only with the people with whom one wanted to. Speaking of people, Michael missed his former maid very much, so he picked up the phone and called Betty, but the answer was only a dial tone. After Michael got home, the first thing he did was shower and eat, and then sat on the bed. There was no way the man could stop thinking about Betty. He just wanted to hear her voice or her laughter. So he dialed her number again. But this time the phone was already off. Michael was confused by the fact that the girl was ignoring him again. After all, they had agreed that after prison he would give her the money. So the man continued to call Betty without ceasing. And then the businessman decided to come to visit her. And the man found out the address quickly. It was not difficult for him to run the data about the maid through the service agency. Having received the desired address, the man called a cab and arrived at the place. Then he got out of the car, entered the entrance, and went up to the 4th floor. After knocking on Betty's door several times and seeing no response, Michael became frustrated and decided to leave. Just as the man began to descend the stairs, a neighbor came out and beckoned him over. The elderly woman stated that Betty had not been home for 4 days, and it was scaring her. Gino and Betty were not just neighbors, but one might even say friends. Betty visited her grandmother regularly, bringing her groceries and scrubbing her floors. The women bonded over their hatred of other neighbors who were getting drunk and debauched in the entryway. After communicating with his neighbor, Betty man was scared out of his wits. He was tormented by thoughts that the girl was kidnapped by Adriana. But Michael did not know what to do in this case, especially since recently in the police department he himself offered the girl to leave everything in this city and go away to rest. Michael made a decision. If Betty doesn't respond to his last text message, tomorrow he will run her number through military acquaintances and find out where her smartphone is. Waking up in the morning, the man wrote the following text to his favorite girl's number. "Hello, dear Betty. I am guilty of many things to you and will not impose on you again. Just say it's all right. That will be enough for me." In a minute, Michael's cell phone received a reply message, "Everything's okay, dear." The man looked at the smartphone screen in surprise. Betty, she never called him that. It wasn't her style. She liked to use a diminutive nickname. Adriana, on the other hand, just loved the word darling. Despite the promises he'd made to himself, yesterday Michael realized he wouldn't rest until he ran the maid's number. In the meantime, Adriana was snickering with the phone in her hands. Suddenly, she stopped briefly and moved closer to Betty, who was sleeping sweetly in the arms of the battery. The teacher gave her victim a little shake and asked, "And you always take so long to sleep? I have some news for you here." Betty opened her eyes wide and stared at Adriana. A moment later, coming to her senses, she asked, "What is it?" Adriana smiled predatorily and quoted her ex-husband's message, and then switched to Betty. "But what do you think of the message? My husband seems to have a crush on you." "Oh, ex-husband. Although who are we kidding? Status never stopped you. You know what the funny thing is?" Betty sighed and asked irritably, "And what's that?" Adriana rolled her eyes in response and said the following, "Well, the funny thing is that he'll be calling and sending smiley faces to the corpse, or the piece of meat that will be lying in my dog's kennel. And I'll be telling him about endless love in the Bahamas, like I love him. I mean you, but I can't go back to him. There are only beautiful, tanned men around." Betty twirled the finger of his free hand at his temple and asked Adriana, "Maybe you should continue your treatment. I'm just a little sick of you." The girl was hungry and tired, so she continued to speak negatively. She started screaming, "Let me go, you sick psychopath. I do not need your ex-husband and the new one. I don't care about anyone." And Adriana again felt a surge of anger and with all her might hit Betty in the face with the phone. She blacked out again, and the teacher said out loud, "Well, there you go passing out again." A few hours later, Michael's acquaintances from the military unit were able to trace the girl's number and called the businessman. They informed him that the phone was last online in the area of One Forest. There is another well-known garage cooperative there. The man decided to clarify who owns the cooperative, and when they told him that or not, everything fell into place. Michael decided not to call the police, but to go straight to Betty and save him and save her. He didn't trust anyone, especially after the incident with the charges in jail. Everyone but Betty had given up on him, so it was impossible to abandon her. Preparing his gun and knife, the man felt more confident and called a cab for the garage cooperative. Arriving at the place, Michael was horrified at the territory. It was about 10 garages, and outside it was gradually starting to get dark. Should I knock on every garage, or is it better to start shouting? Would it help? Michael pondered aloud. After 5 minutes, however, the man decided to try both methods in practice. Betty was lying unconscious on the basement floor. Suddenly, she heard a creepy man's screams through her sleep. The girl thought to herself, "What a nasty voice," forgetting that she was not at home. The girl tried to get up and yelled back before opening her eyes. What the hell for? Suddenly regaining consciousness from her own screaming, the girl realized that the man screaming outside was Michael, and he was looking for her. After several unsuccessful attempts to reach the man, Betty realized it was ineffective. It is likely that isolation has been carried out here, the girl thought to herself. There was a small battery and a toilet near Betty, so she had an interesting idea to use a chain to disintegrate the technical devices. Yes, it was a risky idea, but she had no choice. Betty hoped that Michael would hear the sound of water, or at least notice the puddle by the garage. Betty began to pound her chain with all her might, first on the radiator and then on the toilet. And she succeeded in getting her sanction. Cracks started to form, and Michael heard a noise. When Michael determined where the water would be, he admired the girl's ingenuity. But it was necessary to act decisively. Therefore, the man left sentimentality for later. He accelerated and tried to kick the door with his foot, but he failed. So Michael brought his gun to bear and punched the lock with it. And then he ran inside. But it turns out that getting inside is not the hardest part. There's still the basement to find. The man searched the place several times, but to no avail. He was about to call the police, but to dirty his hand with something sticky. So he went into the bathroom and noticed a strange faucet, which did not turn on and stood crooked. Michael hit it sharply. Suddenly, a secret room opened up. He went down the stairs to the basement and saw the wet tube jumping from behind the boiling water. Michael quickly oriented himself. First, he found the keys to the chain, then connected it from the girl's hand, and then dragged Vetu towards the exit. Once out in the open, the happy couple ran toward the road. When Michael caught a cab, he immediately took Betty to his house to protect her from Adriana's paw. At this time, Alfred rewrote Serioja's company to Adriana, and after signing the contract, the businessman looked tenderly into her eyes and said, "Will you marry me?" And Adriana answered the man without hesitation, "Yes, my love." "Well, wait a minute. I want to check something on my phone." The businessman nodded and said the following words, before retreating to the kitchen. "Okay, I'm very happy. My baby girl that you agree. I'm going to go. I'll pour us each a glass of champagne. Soon a new life awaits us without the old mistakes." Adriana smiled and waited until the man stepped away, and then turned on the video surveillance system on her smartphone. Seeing that the basement had flooded and the girl wasn't inside, we teacher couldn't help herself and sagged out loud. Alfred heard the mat from the lips of his beloved and jumped up to her with champagne. Holding out one-line glasses, the man asked what's wrong. "Sweetheart." Adriana realized the need to lie and said, "Yes, the ex-husband is annoying. Still won't leave me alone. Well, you know him. Michael calls me every once in a while, and it's getting really annoying. You can help me deal with him." Alfred blushed with anger and replied, "Let's go. I'll beat him up." Adriana smiled enigmatically and threw back at him. "Let's go." Michael fed Betty some fruit and gave her his clothes from the closet. The girl went and changed her clothes and told Michael about the assault, and at the end of the story emphasized that she needed to go to the police today and file a report on Adriana. The former maid was convinced that it was time to end things with Adriana. If she didn't go to jail now, she was bound to kill someone. Michael, not thinking long enough, agreed. And just as the couple threw on their outerwear and hailed a cab, suddenly the doorbell rang. Looking through the peephole, the man sighed disappointedly and said out loud the following text: "Yes, we're here now, it seems, and ideas are hiding and call the police. And I'll deal with our guests. Tired of running from my ex-wife and her accomplices already. She may know how to piss on women, but she can't beat me in a fight." As Betty hid in the closet and called the police department, Michael suddenly opened the door and a loud rumble was heard. Apparently, someone had fallen and broken the dishes. Unfortunately, it was Michael who fell. Alfred knew where to hit, so he immediately aimed for the nose to get revenge on his fiancée's ex-husband. After the man who opened the door fell down, Alfred declared, "One more time you touch my sweetheart, and I will unscrew your head. She told me how you beat and strangled her. You're a maniac. You're not my friend anymore." Michael stood up, got ice from the refrigerator, and put it on his nose. When the bleeding stopped, Michael threw the ice away. He walked right up to his former friend, suddenly grabbed him by the head, and started slamming him against the wall. The elaborate brawl continued for about half an hour, and the police never arrived. Adriana was the first one who couldn't take it anymore. She pulled out a knife and told Michael to stop. But as soon as he stopped, Alfred got back into the fight. Then Betty couldn't stand it any longer and ran out into the corridor shouting, "Stop. Alfred, I may not know you, but you trusted the wrong woman. She's a maniac, and I have real proof." The men stopped fighting and stared at Vetu, and Adriana was about to stab the girl. And Adriana clenched her fists and then ran forward and swung at Vetu. But suddenly there was the sound of a gunshot. When Michael and Betty came home, the man handed her his gun so that she could always stand up for herself and no longer be afraid of Adriana. But no one knew that the girl would use it already today. When Betty saw the point of the knife, she reflexively pulled out the gun and fired. Everyone called an ambulance, but Adriana was beyond saving. The girl died from a direct shot in the stomach. Of course, together with the ambulance came the police. At first, Vetu, together with two angry men, were taken to the department, but then the girl was released. It was self-defense. Even Alfred confirmed the words of the former maid, although to the point of madness he wanted to avenge her for the death of the woman he loved. Betty was also acquitted in court. She provided not only video footage from Adriana's CCTV camera, but also data about her mental health condition. When Alfred learned the truth about his lover, he stopped hating Michael and Betty, and then even thanked them for saving his own life. Michael failed to win back his company from Alfred and Adriana's father, but the man opened a new company. Now the successful businessman sold not building materials, but medicines. Medicines began to bring much more income than the sale of building materials. After the incident, Michael and Betty became very close. They wanted to start a family and decided never to remember the past again, and especially Michael's outbursts of rage and Adriana's death. Michael became about husband cleaning and cooking, and in the house he decided to do his own chores. And Betty forgot flirting with strange men and finally realized her long-held dream. She married a rich businessman. 3 years later, the happy couple had a long-awaited baby boy. They named the boy Joy. The couple decided to bring up the boy strictly, so they tried not to spoil him with luxurious gifts and taught him to appreciate money. Betty revised her views on life after the birth of the child. She realized that never and under no circumstances should not get involved with a married man, even if it seems that the young man is ideal by all parameters. Behind his beautiful facade can hide a lot of unpleasant things. No one can tell you how many skeletons a couple has in their closet and what will happen to your life if you get involved in someone else's marriage. Betty may have gotten her way, but at what cost? Fights, kidnappings, murders. Not every girl would want to go through that to start a family with a rich businessman and have a child. And is the money worth the agony? Probably not. Betty married Michael not because of his financial status, but because the man saved her from his wife Adriana's monster and then showed her what caring and love are. You should only fight for a relationship if there are feelings there, and if there aren't, it's best to back off. It is likely that the married suitor already has a crazy Adriana of his own.
Subscribe and click the bell.
The old boat stood dead weight in the garage, and Lisa sat pensively in the front, in the small wooden triangle at the bow. This boat had been made by Dad himself when he was still young, a long, long time ago. He used to take meticulous care of it, painting it every spring with new varnish, touching up and fixing things. Lisa used to come here to visit the boat when she was homesick for her father. As a child, she loved to sit like this on the very edge of the boat, and it seemed to her that she was not riding on the boat, but flying low over the water, like an Indian goddess, sitting on an invisible flying mat. It had been 5 years since Daddy had been gone, and now there was no one to look after the old boat. Lisa's husband, the jovial joker John, has no interest in the boat. He has little interest in anything but beer and soccer. Is she so wrong about him? A few years ago, trying to please her, the daughter of an academic, he took her to theaters, classical concerts, dressed in costumes, and listened to Wagner with her and her father. And then, when they got married, he listened to Wagner for a while, too, though Lisa was already well aware that he didn't need it at all. And now he watched soccer downstairs and drank beer every night. No, Lisa didn't mind at all, to each his own, but why did he have to pretend like that? Now she was disgusted by his pretense and wanted to leave so that she wouldn't see him sitting in her father's favorite chair, with his feet up on the low antique table, eating fish on the newspaper, throwing the scales right on the floor, and drinking beer with his friend Kevin, who came to their cottage from the city almost every weekend. Lisa and went away, upstairs in the attic, and painted her still lifes there. Peonies, poppies, field cornflowers in big empty jugs or in light transparent bottles. Her friend Molly, a classmate, came to visit her from the city too. She and Molly had been friends since childhood, since first grade, and they knew everything about each other and shared their deepest secrets. Molly was her complete opposite. Lisa is fragile, shy, was very sickly as a child, missed school every now and then, came down with another sore throat. Molly is athletic, tall, sturdy, bullied, always able to stand up for herself. They sat at the same desk, and Molly, seeing how Draws in Notebook's dreamy neighbor, admired from the bottom of her heart. "Wow, how do you do it?" "I don't know." Lisa shrugged her shoulders. "I just see it in my head and repeat it." "You're an artist." Molly said affirmatively, and this statement defined Lisa's future profession. She did go to art school after 9th grade and then to the famous Watercolor Academy. Now she herself was already a teacher at this academy, and Molly was a successful coach master of sports in athletics. So different, they nevertheless always found something to talk about and continued to be friends, although it would seem what they could have in common. Molly, the daughter of intelligent parents in a city apartment, My mother even had a servant. My father was an academician of the Russian Academy of Sciences, a respected man, and my mother was also a famous musician, played the piano, taught at the conservatory, and at home gave open lessons. Now there is no mom, no dad. There is only one Lisa and Molly, a loyal, reliable friend on whom you can always rely. Not adapted in the domestic plan, Lisa. She always helped out, at least to get tickets, at least a big cleaning at the cottage, everything. All this was organized by Molly, and many other things too. Lisa just couldn't do without Molly, and John was terribly angry at first when they first started living together. What's she doing here all the time? Doesn't she have her own things to do? Why do you do that, John? Lisa answered with a slight reproachful tone. She's my friend. We're practically like sisters, you know? But I married you. John continued to resent her. Not that sister of yours. Whenever I come home, she's right there, unashamedly lying on our bed. How is that even possible? And she comes out of the bathroom in your robe. I thought she was you from the back the other day. She's sitting at the table by the mirror, with your bath turban on her head, a robe and a mask on her face. I couldn't make it out in the bright light. I came closer. I wanted to hug her, and she started laughing. What, honey? Did you get it wrong? Anyway, you do what you want, but it's got to stop. John went on, I don't want to live in a threesome, and I hope you don't either. That's disgusting. Lisa corrected herself squeamishly. I'm sure, but that was a long time ago, the first year or two of their life together. Then John got used to this state of affairs and didn't mind when Molly fried pancakes in their kitchen or washed windows to help Lisa, who suffered from vertigo. Molly's own home wasn't exactly sweet. She lived in a tiny 2-room apartment with her mother, a half-paralyzed grandmother, and an alcoholic father in the farthest and dustiest factory industrial district. Lisa and the whole family always felt very sorry for her and tried to help her, to buy her a dress, a blouse for holidays, or groceries, ashamed to embarrass her if she seemed inappropriate. Father, bringing tickets to various children's events, Christmas trees, theaters, concerts, and making out vouchers to pioneer camps, never forgot about his daughter's girlfriend, and Molly and Lisa were everywhere together. As they grew older and their interests and studies grew, they were separated a bit. Lisa traveled to gliders with her school, Molly to training camps and competitions, but when they met after separation, they couldn't talk enough. Now that Lisa and John lived mostly in the country, Molly lived in their city apartment, and it was better for her to have a break from annoying relatives and to look after the living space. On weekends, she, if there was no competition or traveling, came to visit them. Molly was not married, nor did she aspire to be. She said with a laugh, "Good men have long ago all taken away. You, Lisa, lucky. You are always lucky. You are happy, and such as me, apparently not supposed to." She laughed gaily, trying to hide her sadness, and immediately rushed either to do the dishes or to cook something delicious in Lisa's big, beautiful kitchen. "I'll be there for you, like a pet." Molly laughed when Lisa convinced her that she would find her destiny. "Molly, you're so sweet." Lisa hugged her, barely reaching her tall friend. "You're like family to me. Do you want me to ask John to introduce you to someone at work?" "No." Molly shook her head. "That's kind of silly. If fate throws up a bow, so be it. And if not, well, I'll be with you my age to roost." She laughed again and kissed her friend on the cheek. "Cheer up, Lisa." As if Lisa were the one who had been deprived of her fate, and not she herself. Molly was not in today. 2 days ago, she had left for another training camp to train young athletes, and in a few days Lisa herself was leaving for practice, for nature, as the artist said, also to train children to paint landscapes. It was stuffy in the bright attic, and the dust flew, spiraling in the sunlight. Lisa suddenly felt so wistful. She got up from behind her easel, stretched, and opened the door. She could still hear the muffled muttering of the television from downstairs, but no one was yelling as loud as they could. Goal, goal. Apparently, the broadcast of the soccer match had already finished, and John and Kevin, just sitting around drinking beer, and the TV was muttering to itself. Lisa went downstairs to pour herself some tea and found that no one was in the spacious kitchen living room anymore. She turned off the TV, put the kettle on, and went outside, and by the garage she saw a startling sight: her own husband and Kevin, a friend of hers, pulling Dad's boat out into the light of day and busily working on it. Lisa smiled happily. "It's beautiful. I guess I was wrong to underestimate him. So what if it's beer? He can if he wants to." Happy, she ran down the steps and past the flower beds. Molly did her best. "Oh, let me in." Lisa laughed. "Your bones are cracking. You'll break them. You track and field athlete." Molly had already prepared an amazing dinner for her arrival. The men, John and Kevin, had roasted the meat. They opened a bottle of light white wine for her and Molly and drank beer as usual, but then also brandy, sweet for tea, said chuckling John, opening a bottle from his father's old stock. Lisa wanted to be indignant because they had agreed not to touch her father's bar unless it was absolutely necessary, but she restrained herself. And today was just such an occasion. They were waiting for her, they were trying, and she was going to make a showdown. Why did they open a collector's cognac? It's low. Dad would have said so. It's low and ugly. In the morning after breakfast, John, Molly, and Kevin, blindfolding her with a kerchief, solemnly led her to the pond, said surprise. Smiling, Lisa guessed, of course, what the surprise was, but she didn't let on. She was trying to play the game of surprise and curiosity, but when they took off her handkerchief for a laugh, 3 times around its axis, Lisa did not pretend to aghast. My God, what a miracle! On the quay stood, barely bobbing on the water, a boat shining with new turquoise paint, and the inscription on the side, Elizabeth, in dark brown ochre, stood out brightly, flashing against the glossy azure. "Thank you, thank you." She threw herself around John's neck and then hugged her friend tightly and even kissed the cheek of an embarrassed Kevin, who was blushing with embarrassment. "Thank you, guys." Wait, there's more." And Molly ceremoniously handed her a large cardboard box. "Is it just me, or is it someone's birthday today, huh?" "Happy birthday." The boys cheered and popped a bottle of champagne. Barely breathing, Lisa pulled a tiny kitten out of the box. "Oh my God, Molly," her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, it's so cute. Do you like it?" Molly perked up. "You ask." Lisa clutched the baby to her chest. "How wonderful you are, how fluffy." "He's tricolored, see." Molly proudly pointed her finger at the tiny body. "I'm told tricolored brings happiness. I'm already the happiest in the world." Lisa almost burst into tears of delight and emotion. "I have you so. All right." She was stopped by her friend. "We're the best, of course." And she laughed, throwing back her head, loudly, joyfully, reminding something of a prancing horse. And now sitting, as in her childhood, on the bow of the boat that had come back to life, Lisa felt a deep sense of peace. How good it felt! Her daddy's old favorite boat, which he had once given her when she was 5 years old for her birthday, pretentiously and lavishly named Elizabeth, was back in service. Here she is silently gliding on the water surface of the pond, cutting through the cassava, algae breaking through the thickets of lilies. "Oh, look, a kingfisher!" And another one, and another one. Lisa laughed happily, showing her friends a flock of bright azure birds that flew up in a scattering of jewels near the shore. There were always their nests here, I remember. How long had it been since she had ridden like this on this old pond? What a magical beauty it is here. Hey, on the boat. Suddenly it sounded nearby. Watch out! Cutting through the calm, standing water, a motorboat was rushing towards them, roaring and blasting fountains of spray with its propeller, leaving behind a real whirlpool. Look out! The motorboat was getting closer and closer. Lisa stared at the flying jet ski in amazement, and at some point she realized that it was going to hit them. "Stop! Stop!" she screamed, and their own boat, already rocking on the waves, raised by the motorboat and shaking left and right. She was sitting in a Turkish way, as in her childhood, and frantically grabbed the side with her hand. John was yelling and cursing at the top of his voice, waving his oar, trying to push off and avoid a collision. The guy sitting in the motorboat, diving goggles halfway down his face, disheveled gray hair, some kind of tattered t-shirt, was desperately twisting the wheel and yelling back. "It's jammed! Turn, turn, turn." Boom, terrible jolt, noise, crack. Lisa, unable to keep her balance, falls into the water, very near the dreaded spinning propeller. Lisa screams terribly, hides in the depths, and the calm, bright lights, huge lamps, terrible cold. Why is it so cold? Scary creatures wearing the same huge glasses halfway down their faces, the other half not visible either, swathed in white cloth. Pain, eerie, still developing in two. Lisa wants to scream at the top of her voice again, but only a suppressed mooing comes out. She's awake, add anesthesia. Warmth envelops her, the bright light is veiled by a white cloth, the jackhammer is no longer pounding in her head. Good, she can sleep. Lisa didn't finally regain consciousness until a week after the accident at the pond. She had been kept in a medically induced coma the whole time. The painful shock of the terrible injuries was too great. A motorboat propeller had severely damaged her spine and almost ripped off one foot. At the clinic where she was brought, an old surgeon, a friend of Lisa's father, seeing in the patient's chart her rare middle name, worriedly poked his finger. "This is not the daughter of Academician Vishnevsky. We do not know." The residents waved their hands. The surgeon ordered to make inquiries. At the post asked the relatives, and the information was confirmed. It was indeed Elizabeth, the daughter of the same academician. "Hang in there, Lisa," said the doctor. "You'll make it, no matter what it costs me." It cost both her and the doctor a week and a half without rest and almost no sleep. Lisa was under anesthesia and on tranquilizers the entire time. The surgeon on cigarettes and coffee. But in the end, he managed to get her out and reattach her foot and reassemble her spine. Now, all we had to do was wait to see if it worked or not. Where are her relatives? With red, watery eyes, the surgeon came out of the operating room. Let them know it was a success. Tomorrow, if it's an uneventful night, we can move her to intensive care. Molly and John were sitting in the spacious country kitchen of the academician's house and drinking beer when the phone rang and John was informed that his wife had been successfully operated on for the third and final time, and now all they had to do was wait for her to wake up. "Will she walk?" Concerned John asked. He was told that it was too early to say anything about that. Shit. John threw the phone on the couch. Survivor. Molly was silent and concentrating on chewing crab chips. Finally, Wiping her hands with a napkin and taking a sip from her bottle, she looked up with angry eyes. "I told you not to call an ambulance, motherfucker." She threw the empty bottle at the sideboard. The polished wood gave a resounding thump. The bottle shattered into splinters, and the antique glassware on top of it clinked pitifully. "Look out," rumbled John. "Don't beat up the antiques." "Fuck you. Spit on the floor, Molly, with your antiques. What? Did you bite it? She's alive. Your wife is alive, and still wakes up, calculates everything herself or with someone else's help, and will throw us out of here, and that's only in the best case, in the best case." Already Molly was yelling, out of fear and rage. "And if you coward had done as I said, we would be in the chocolate now, yes." "Calm down, Molly." John walked over to her and put his arm around her shoulders as she sat in the padded chair. "Molly, let's not do this, okay? We're so good together. We'll think of something. I already have a plan, Molly. I mean, think about it. What would we look like if we hadn't called an ambulance right away? I'd be in jail right now, and I'd be dead. We have to be careful, you know. Careful, step by step." "Okay." Molly has softened up a bit. "But what about this one? What if it cracks?" "No," John said firmly. "He's already there." The girl tracked down the doctor and inquired, "Do you need any medication?" "You tell me, I'll get it. Medication can't help here." The doctor frowned. "We need to operate, and urgently. Surgery." "Then do it. What are you waiting for?" "It's a paid operation." "How paid?" The doctor didn't say anything. "Okay, but there are quotas, right?" "On the quota, the queue for the year ahead. And if we do not make your grandmother's surgery in the next 2-3 months, you will lose her." "How much is the surgery?" The doctor wrote down the amount on a piece of paper and silently handed it to Emily. "Where are we going to get such money?" exclaimed the girl in despair. "Is it impossible to do anything? There are some foundations that help to find money. There are funds, but they tend to help the young and your grandmother. Excuse me, age. What am I supposed to do?" Emily cried out of desperation. "Don't give up. Your grandmother doesn't need the extra worry right now, and look for money. I don't know. Borrow from someone, take out a loan. Without surgery, how long can she live? Until the first stress. She's in mortal danger from any kind of excitement right now. Can you keep her from worrying? No. Think about it. Surgery is the only thing that will help her." The girl returned home, completely powerless, lay down in bed without undressing. She opened herself up with a blanket and sobbed into her pillow. "I'll never find that kind of money," she read. "Even if I sold everything here, I wouldn't get that kind of money. What can I do? Where can I find the damn money? There must be some way out." Her sobs were interrupted by a phone call. An unfamiliar number popped up on the screen. "Hello." Emily answered cautiously. "Emily, it's Robert. Remember me? You scratched my car." The girl went cold. It had been 3 weeks since the accident, and she had forgotten about it, busy with domestic problems. "Yes, I remember." "Unsure," she answered. "I'm calling to find out when you're going to pay me back for the repair." "How much?" In a hoarse voice of excitement, she asked. "You'd better not know." Robert laughed. "I doubt very much you have any. I'll try, I'll earn it." Emily spoke quickly. "I'll give it to you as promised. I have another offer." "What?" The girl was surprised. "This is not a telephone conversation. Can we meet tomorrow at the cafe after work?" "I don't understand. What do you want from me?" "I told you I'll give you the money. I'll tell you everything when we meet. If you come, otherwise I'll sue you for the repair money. Do you want that kind of trouble? Okay, I'll come over. Emily reluctantly agreed. She showed up a little before the appointed time. Will you order something? The waiter asked her politely. Yes, a cup of coffee, please. She stared hatefully out the window, waiting for Robert. There was a cup of coffee in front of her, but she didn't even touch it. Good evening, she heard and shuddered in surprise. Sorry, I'm late. Business. I suggest we go straight to you. Emily nodded in agreement, glanced at the car parked in front of the cafe, and blushed. The black, shiny side of the car still had a huge scratch on it, and it looked especially ugly in the burgundy rays of the setting sun. Tell me quickly what you want. Take your time. Robert grinned. You won't get rid of me that easily, and you'll have to pay for it anyway. I won't sleep with you. Don't even count on it. Emily cut Emily off angrily. What makes you think I want to sleep with you? The young man raised his eyebrows in surprise. I'm not going to throw myself at your bones, he remarked, hinting at her slim figure. I have a business proposition for you. If you do everything right, I will not only forgive the debt, but also give you money. Emily looked at him with interest. What do you want me to do? You see, I'm from a wealthy family, and my parents for some reason decided that I must marry the daughter of my father's childhood friend. Is she ugly? That's not the point. I don't love her. I already have a fiancé of my own choosing, but I know for a fact that my parents won't agree to our marriage. My father will think of disinheriting me, and I don't want that. I don't understand. What does this have to do with me? You're going to play my fiancé. What? She looked at Robert in surprise. Are you out of your mind? I've thought of everything. The young man hurried on. My father is a very stubborn man. There's no way he'd let me marry someone like you. What's wrong with me? The girl looked at him suspiciously. It's written on your forehead. A hillbilly. I still don't understand. What don't you understand? I'll introduce you as my fiancé. My father, of course, will fight to keep us from getting married. In his mind, you're no match for the rich heir to the family business, and we'll have to part ways. I resent the whole world and my father, who did me such an injustice. I will stop eating and sleeping. My torment of lost love will become unbearable for others. Robert accompanied his fiery speech with theatrical gestures. Emily, smiling, looked at him. But I won't suffer for long, to be honest. I won't last a day without food, but a couple of months or so. My parents, of course, my suffering will bring a lot of grief. My father, out of guilt towards his son, will eventually agree to all my terms. That's when I'll introduce Kelly to them as my true one and only lover. By then, no one will even remember my friend's hated daughter. I get to marry the girl I love, you get the reward, and we're even. $50. Emily said quickly. What? I don't understand, Robert. I want $50,000 and not a dime less for helping you. The girl repeated firmly. Robert looked at her dumbfounded and even coughed, choking with indignation. Aren't you confused now? Actually, you still owe me for the repair of the car. Isn't it too expensive for your services? I didn't expect that. You look like you're doing the right thing. Or you're paying that much, categorically declared the girl, desperately looking at him. Or I refuse to participate in your play. Find another fool who agrees to play the village simpleton. I'm sure she'll cost you more. It's none of my business, of course. But why do you need so much money? Where are you going to spend it in your village? As you rightly said, it's none of your business. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, not letting the tears escape. It's not for me. My grandmother urgently needs an operation. This money is for her. If I don't find this amount of money soon, she could die at any moment. I have no choice." Robert hummed, hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand. "To hell with you. You'll get your $50. When are we going to meet the parents?" The girl sighed with relief and answered, "The day after tomorrow." "Well," Robert said cheerfully and held out his hand to Emily. "Shall we make a deal?" "Deal." She held out hers in return. "I'll be there to pick you up, ready when you are. I'm on my way. Are you ready?" Robert called at the agreed time. "Ready." Looking back at the old woman, the girl replied in a whisper. The grandmother slept in her room. Emily went in from time to listen to her breathing. "Just stop the car on the outskirts of the village. I don't want Grandma to see you." "Why not?" The young man was surprised. "I don't want to worry her unnecessarily. I can't lie, and telling the truth would kill her." "I got it. I'm already here. I'm waiting for you. I'm on my way." Emily hung up. "Grandma?" The girl peeked into the room. Jenna opened her eyes. "I've been invited to visit here. Will you be alone?" She looked at her guiltily. "Oh, how nice, of course I will." The old woman was happy. "Go, have some fun at least. Why should you stay at home with a sick old woman? Your business is young. Are you feeling all right? Don't worry, you'll rest at least. You're exhausted. I see. If you need anything, call me immediately. I'll be right over." "Okay." Emily kissed her grandmother. "Go with God, my dear." Robert looked with interest at the girl who was hurrying along the road. Yes, she was dressed, to put it bluntly, out of fashion. The young man thought to himself, "The dress is simple. They don't wear such clothes nowadays, only for the village. It's good that it's not up to her heels, but her legs are nice, and her hair is gorgeous. She should go to a good master. He could make a princess out of her." Emily, feeling his gaze on her, fixed her hair in embarrassment. Usually she put it in a tight braid so it wouldn't get in the way at work, but today she left it loose and slightly curled the ends. "Don't you have another dress?" asked Robert when the girl got into the car. "What's wrong with my dress?" "I'm sorry. Famous brands do not sell in our stores, and I don't have the money, as you know. I don't have. Besides, I'm supposed to play a hillbilly, and we have our own fashion. We can't keep up with you city folk, can we?" "Okay, no offense," peacefully said Robert and started the car. "It suits you." "Let's go." And he started the car. "Now listen to me. You have to create the image of a country girl who is dead set on the major. Sleeping and seeing how to marry me off so you can get a city license. Your parents can't guess that you've got a college degree under your belt. Let them see you as a poorly educated, uneducated girl. It's gonna be tough. It's okay. For 50,000 you'll work hard and you'll play it right. Remember, you have to scare them, push them away. Don't say or do anything to make them feel sorry for you or, God forbid, sympathize with you." "We're here," Robert announced, stopping the car outside the 3-story mansion. "Have you memorized everything?" "Yes, I'll try to play my part well." The young people walked into the house. Emily was worried. "Robert? At last, we've been waiting for you." Mother was the first to rush out to greet them. "Dear Mom and Dad." Robert bowed dutifully to his parents, giving them a solemn look. "Meet Emily, my fiancée." Emily was shy, sunk her gaze and remained silent, a light blush playing on her cheeks. "Son?" The father's eyebrows rose in amazement. "Surprised, so surprised. Are you sure that this is the girl you are ready to call your wife?" "What's wrong with that, Dad?" "Emily is a very nice, sweet girl. Yeah, she's not what you're used to seeing around me, but that's what I appreciate about her. What a big house you have. Gaining courage, Emily announced the living room with a glance. It must be worth a lot of money. Great. My grandmother and I have a small house. And the furniture. She was genuinely admiring the furnishings. I don't even want to hurt it. Playing her role, she began to look with interest at the paintings hanging on the walls. Paintings, she touched one. Never understood why to buy them. There is no use from them, only collect dust. Paintings are aesthetically useful, if you know what I mean, grumbled father spitefully, looking at the girl. They should be admired, eh? Emily looked around again. Why is the vase on the floor? The girl touched it. Careful, my dear, Kathy exclaimed warningly. It's a 16th century vase. It can't be. And how well preserved is it? Wow, I've only seen these in history books. The parents were pathetic to look at. Robert chuckled to himself, but didn't interfere. I suggest we sit at the table. My father resolutely went to his seat. Oh, really? I'm so confused. Kathy had the servants bring the hot pot. Emily, what do you do? I work on the farm. And where did you and our son meet? In a nightclub, wasn't it? What do you think? That if I'm from the country, I'm so dark? No, I don't think so. My mother was embarrassed. Do you live with your grandmother? Where are your parents? They died in a car accident. I'm so sorry, we didn't know. Oh, it's okay. It was a long time ago. I don't really remember them. We're serving meat. Emily, pretending to be an uneducated hillbilly, grabbed a fork and hurriedly began to eat the meat. When she noticed Kathy's horrified look on her face, she was embarrassed. I'm sorry. With her mouth full, she said, Am I doing something wrong? Take your time, take the knife. That's not the way to behave at the table here. Robert said in a deliberately loud voice. Oh, I didn't know. The fork accidentally fell out of the girl's hands right on the floor. I'm sorry, I'll clean it up. She's blushing. I'm so clumsy. That's okay. No. Emily jumped up. I'll clean up my own mess. I'm used to doing everything myself. That's commendable, of course, but in our house we have special people to do it. Kathy remarked and pressed her lips together. Robert was having fun. Wow, I'd already believed she was so inept. Now her parents will definitely do everything they can to get rid of her. When the maid had cleaned up the floor and everyone had finally settled down, Sebastian spoke. It's nice in your village, the fresh air, the freedom. My childhood was spent in the countryside with my grandmother, too. That's true. Looking at him dreamily, Emily answered. But I want to move to the city as soon as possible. As soon as I get married to Robert, I will not stay a day in the village. Your house is big enough room for everyone. It's good that you don't have to rent an apartment. A lot of our girls work for an apartment. Do you know how expensive it is to rent an apartment nowadays? And I was lucky, yes, my favorite. She smiled sweetly at the young man. Well, maybe you will not be very comfortable to live with us. Cautiously asked the mother. Usually young people try to live away from their parents. Why not? You've got a big place to dance. We don't even have to see each other. We'll take a part of the second floor, for example. Surely there's an emergency exit in the house. She hummed in satisfaction when her father nodded his head, confirming her guess. But our villagers will have one when I tell them what a fancy house I'll be living in. Even having a baby won't be a problem. Robert will hire a nanny, and we've put them in a separate room next to you. Oh, I love it here. I'd move in right now. Too bad Grandma will be alone. Maybe you have a room for her too. We'll find a room for her. Oh, we'll all live here. Robert realized from the confused look on his parents' faces that it was time to end the show. He was afraid of overdoing it. "I'm sorry," he said, rising from the table, "but we should get going. I have to take Emily home, and then I have some errands to run." Everyone stood up. "I apologize if I did something wrong," Emily said. She was terribly ashamed of her behavior. She was intelligent, well-mannered, and could hardly restrain herself not to immediately confess everything to her unhappy and frightened parents. "I'm very glad Robert has such a good mom and dad. Goodbye," smiling politely. The parents walked the young people to the car and breathed a sigh of relief as they drove away from the house. "What was that all about?" the father inquired. "Where did he get this country girl from?" "He always liked glamorous girls. I expected a bright blonde with plump lips and a tight dress that left no room for imagination. And this, Kathy said thoughtfully, there's something about her." "Yes, she's different, but you've noticed, Father, she's not lost her shyness and blushing. It's so unusual. That's the first thing I noticed, by the way, but I kept quiet. So what do we do now? We'll see." While the parents were at a loss as to why their son had brought to their house a girl who was not suitable for him, young people sat in the car, looked at each other, and finally gave vent to their stifling laughter. "You're so imaginative." Robert laughed. "I almost didn't believe that you were really so ill-mannered and that you were using me to get out of town. You have no idea." Laughing to the point of tears, said Emily. "How ashamed I was to behave like that. I'm not like that at all. And there are no such people in my neighborhood. I just remembered the heroine of some show and copied her behavior. Hey, have you ever thought about being an actress? You could play such an idiot on stage. I did it." The girl grew serious. "Only for her grandmother's sake. I hope I don't have to meet your parents again. I don't want to deceive them again. I was immediately disgusted to take part in your play." "Don't worry about it," the young man said lightly. "I'm sure they will already today forbid me to communicate with you even close. You've done your job. When do I get the money?" "As soon as my parents demand that I break up with you immediately, I will immediately transfer the amount to your account. No offense, but I need to make sure we're on the same page." When Robert returned home, he expected his parents to attack him with righteous anger, but nothing happened. They locked themselves away. The young man grinned, probably cleaning up his feelings about Emily. "Okay, I won't go to them. Let them calm down, think it over. Let's leave the conversation until morning." He went quietly to his room, and confident that his plan had worked, fell into a deep sleep. "Son?" 2 days later, Sebastian reminded him. "My mother and I have decided to have a celebration on the occasion of our 30th anniversary together. We have already ordered dinner at our favorite restaurant. I congratulate you." Robert was worried. "That's right," solemnly announced the father. "Mother and I want to see you with Emily, of course." "What about Emily?" The young man was stunned. "I thought you didn't want her in our house anymore." Sebastian knew his son very well, so he realized at once that he was up to something, but he couldn't figure out what. "She's certainly peculiar," the man said, "but she's very open and kind, no matter how strange it may seem." The mother interjected. "We liked her." "Of course," added the father. "We'll have to work with her a little to teach her some basic table manners, say, but it's all such trifles. The main thing is that she's sincere." "Robert, how many grades of education does she have?" 11, mechanically answered the young man. He suddenly realized that his plan had failed miserably. "That's wonderful," Kathy exclaimed. "We'll hire tutors and prepare her for college. She seemed a little silly to me at first, but I was shocked by her behavior at the table. But then my father and I discussed it all and realized her directness and ingenuousness were to blame, and it can be cured. The woman laughed. But it is impossible to teach kindness and openness. I agree with my mother. It is rare to meet such girls nowadays. She only needs a little dressing up and makeup. With your permission, I'll do it myself. It needs a woman's hand. I'll do everything. I'll pick out dresses for her in advance. I'll enroll her in a beauty parlor. We'll make a real gem of an evening out of her. I think, discreetly, Robert remarked, she won't agree to go to the beauty parlor with you, and she won't accept the dress. You don't know girls. They're ready to store all day long. And you don't know Emily, parried Robert. What a bastard! He thought angrily. His insides were boiling with indignation. It seems my plan has really failed. I've missed something. But I won't give up so easily. As he left the house, he immediately started calling Emily. They like you. He boiled. I didn't expect them to like you. They really believe that you are my fiancé. Who's here? Emily asked, nodding her head at the young man and girl who had entered the room. This is my friend David. Shit. Robert cursed. What bad timing. David? Kathy smiled. Why are you, dear, late? The woman picked up the young man with one hand and the girl with the other and led him over to Emily and Robert. You probably haven't met Emily yet, have you? This is our son's fiancée. He has kept her so carefully hidden from us, he's no good. The girl saw David's eyes open wide in surprise. He had already opened his mouth to say something when Robert interrupted his friend. David, I have something urgent to discuss with you. Shall we? Explain what's going on. David stared at him in bewilderment. Who is this girl? And why is your mother calling her your fiancée? I thought she was your fiancée, Kelly. What, did you trade her for this one? He nodded his head toward Emily and wrinkled his nose. I don't know how you could get involved with her and bring her here. Are you out of your mind? Shut up. Robert stopped his friend. It's not what you think. And he told me about the bride his parents had set him up with and the pact with Emily. So she's making this play in front of her parents just for the money? Yes, and I'm begging you not to tell anyone, especially Kelly. She can't know anything. Swear you won't say anything. I swear. Promised David. But I don't suppose your mother would mind a bride like that, would she? That's the trouble. We agreed that Emily would get drunk, which would make her parents angry, but now I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't bother them. I can help you. How? I'll seduce her in front of everyone. I don't think Kathy and Sebastian can forgive her for cheating on them. Just don't go overboard. I don't want a scandal. Don't worry, you'll see a little flirting, and then in front of your parents, I'll steal her away. They're smart people. They'll know why we're going to be alone. How do you like that idea? It's not a bad idea. Robert said hesitantly, Will my fiancée fall for it? Maybe I should warn her. Let her play along. Absolutely not. It has to look natural. Are you questioning my ability to seduce girls? With a conspiratorial wink at his friend, David headed over to Emily. Emily? He decided to take the bull by the horns. You're adorable. May I have this dance? Oh, she was embarrassed and looked anxiously back at Robert. I can't dance. Oh, that's all right. We'll fix that. In fact, I think Robert will mind. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I entertained his fiancée a little. I can see you've been bored. He put his arm around her and led her to the dance floor. David put one hand on her back and the other below her waist. I don't like you hugging me too frivolously, Emily said sternly to her partner. She was already drunk, but she realized that her friend Robert was up to something indecent. "Come on," roughly said David right in her ear. "I know everything. You don't have to pretend with me. I can see right through people like you. Robert, I know you're easily seduced, doll, and your fiancé's parents must realize that, so you'll have to play along. I'm sure it won't be too hard for you, though. Robert's not your first hookup, is he? Come on, give me a big hug. If you start getting handsy." She gave him a threatening look, Emily. "I'm not responsible for myself. I might punch you. I doubt anyone can stop me from doing that. We have to look natural for my friend's parents to believe that you're just a corrupt wench and can get carried away with anyone, especially when drunk. I've seen you with a glass of wine, and Robert's parents saw it too. Now I'm gonna have to kiss you, so let's not disappoint them. Just try it." With indignation, she gritted her teeth. "You'll have to be patient, otherwise no one will believe that you are easy to seduce." With these words, he sank his lips into hers. And now the next act of the play awaits the audience. It's time for us to get some privacy. Emily swayed slightly, not firmly followed David, accompanied by the perplexed looks of Robert's parents. Emily didn't care what they thought of her. In the morning, she opened her eyes with difficulty. Her head ached and her mouth felt as dry as the Sahara. She struggled to get out of bed and went to the kitchen. She drank a glass of water and looked into her grandmother's room. "Why are you lying down?" she asked her. "Are you sick? Maybe an ambulance? What's wrong with you, granddaughter?" The grandmother asked anxiously. "I've never seen you like this in my life. Why did you get drunk? I was so scared when they brought you in the car. You didn't look like yourself. Disheveled, I couldn't say a word. I had another heart attack, and today I can't get up. I'm sorry, Grandma, for upsetting you. I'm so ashamed, really. Why did you do that? Did I teach you to do that? And it's so embarrassing in front of the neighbors. But please forgive me. I'm really worried about you. How can you stay here alone? I don't have long to live. God forbid if you get addicted to drink. Who will support you?" "What's wrong, Grandma?" Emily sat on the edge of the bed next to the old woman. "That was the first and last time. And you're not going to die. We'll definitely think of something." "No, you can't help me now. How are we going to get the money for the operation? I'll live as long as God gives me. I wish you'd get better. I don't want to leave with a heavy heart. I just want to know that you found your happiness. Otherwise, you'll be all alone." Jenna leaned back on the pillow. "I'm tired. You go, I'll sleep a little." Emily went back to her room, lay down on the bed and thought. What to do? With Robert, the idea did not work out. Why did she even agree to participate in this adventure? For my grandmother's sake, of course, only for her. But now I can't take money from him. I don't need anything from him at all. The girl jumped out of bed and went to the window. "I like him," suddenly she confessed. "Oh my God!" Emily grabbed her head. "What am I thinking? How can I, a country girl, dream of such a guy? He's got a fiancée. She's a match for me. Will he pay attention to me? He's probably forgotten my name by now. That's what I should do. Don't look at other people's fiancés. That's all." She shook her head. It is necessary to throw out bad thoughts and continue to live as before. All these acquaintances with the sons of rich parents has not brought happiness to anyone. I need to think about work and my grandmother. Yes, it's decided, she said firmly to herself. I will never agree to meet him again. I must stop all communication with him before I finally lost my head. Forget it like a bad dream. Emily? Jenna looked out the window one night and said, "What's that car parked in front of our house?" "It's a stranger." "Strange? Who could it be?" "You don't know?" "I know. The girl's a little gloomy. I'll find out. She went out into the street with a shawl over her shoulders. Why did you come here? She spoke sharply. I told you not to bother my grandmother. Why didn't you call? You can't say everything on the phone, and I have no one else to talk to. Robert confessed, approaching her. The whole plan is down the drain. David, my so-called friend, he grinned wryly. He'd dropped in on my parents by accident, and he'd said so much. I didn't expect it from him. He set me up. He said that you were only with me for money, and he told me that a couple months ago I had another girl. I don't know what to do now. How do I face my parents? The best part. Emily looked boldly at Robert. Explain yourself to your parents. Stop lying. They don't deserve to be treated like this. Confess everything. It'll be easier on yourself. I'm sure they'll understand you. They're not animals. They're just wishing you happiness, not realizing you have a sweetheart. No. I can't tell them everything right now. You said you'd help, so you have to follow through. Don't count on me. The girl replied firmly. I refuse to take part in this farce. I've done so much already. This is for your amusement, and I have no time to play with toys. I have to think about where to find money for my grandmother's operation. Leave me alone. Don't worry about it. I'm ready to pay for your grandma's treatment. Give me an account to transfer the money to. But I didn't keep my end of the bargain. I don't care. I don't care anymore. If I say I'll help you without conditions. Well, I don't know. Emily's confused. I don't feel comfortable taking money from you, so David's right. David is a traitor. I don't know why he even got involved in this case, but I'll figure it out. Tell me where to wire the money, and I will do it immediately. Jenna's operation was a success. It was done as soon as the money came in. Everything's going well. The attending physician remarked. Your grandmother will be back home as good as new. Thank you, doctor. Grandma was on the mend. The girl was flying on wings until one day the phone rang. Emily? One day she heard the phone ring. It's Kathy, Robert's mom. Remember me? You were at our house and then at the restaurant where you disappeared so suddenly with David? Yes, of course I remember. Hello. Orabev, the girl replied. I forbid you to mess with my son's head. I know that you decided to marry Robert for the money, and I know that you have already received a tidy sum on your account. Well, I don't want you anywhere near my son anymore. You got your money in your pocket. Leave Robert alone. Shame on you for covering up for Grandma's illness. But the girl tried to explain. I'm not going to listen to your lies. It is you with your beauty and supposed innocence turned my son's head, but I will not be fooled. I know you're kind. I forbid you to come within a cannon shot of my son. If you try anything else to trick him, I'll go to the police. You're a fraud. That's not true. You're wrong. I don't want to hear a word of it. You got the money, disappeared, broke Robert's heart. And how nice you seemed to Sebastian and me. But in fact, you turned out to be a calculating hypocrite. You've gained our trust, so that your foot in our house will not be in our house anymore. Emily, discouraged by the call, listened silently to the short beeps in the receiver. What did you want? She said, trying to hold back her tears. Everything had happened as planned. Now for the real bride, Robert. The road is clear. We have achieved our goal. And me. The girl threw the phone on the table and cried. Robert walked from corner to corner, measuring the room with his steps, glancing nervously at his watch. It's time to go to the airport, he remarked. I can't be late and not meet Kelly on time. He quickly got into the car. Kelly? He opened his arms to the girl. I didn't expect you to come now. You were going to be home in 2 months, weren't you? This is for you." He handed her a bouquet of red roses. "What's wrong? You're the one I should be asking. What happened?" Coldly, the girl answered him, "I don't know what you mean. David called me and told me you had another fiancé. You think I was supposed to sit around and wait for you to marry her? I demand an explanation. Why are you listening to him?" Robert laughed nervously. "He's always been jealous of me. I think he told you that on purpose so that you would leave me. Don't you know he's jealous of you? He was just waiting for a chance to break us up. I don't really have any other fiancé but you." "You mean?" The girl looked at him suspiciously. "He's making it all up?" "Not exactly." Robert hesitated. "Why don't we sit down somewhere and I'll explain it all to you?" "All right." Kelly agreed reluctantly. "But that doesn't mean I've forgiven you." The young people arrived at the restaurant. Robert ordered dinner. "Look, I did it for us. My parents had the idea of marrying me off to the daughter of a friend of my father's. They wanted to boost business, but they forgot to ask me if I wanted to marry her. What was I supposed to do? I came up with a plan, and Emily came along." "Oh, so the girl David was talking about was a girl?" "I'm not saying no. She must have turned my parents against me. They would have forbidden me to marry her. I would naturally be in inconsolable grief for some time, until my father relented and gave me permission to marry the one I had long considered my fiancée. You do not deceive me." Kelly looked at him jealously. "Was it all like this?" "Of course it was. Why would I deceive you? Everything I do is just for you and me." "And the money? Did you really pay her?" "I did. She kept her end of the bargain, but most importantly, the plan worked, and now I can introduce you to your parents. When were you going to tell me all this? I was expecting you in 2 months. I couldn't have said anything over the phone. You wouldn't have talked to me. Now do you believe that I didn't cheat on you? Tell me, am I forgiven?" "I haven't decided yet." The beauty said haughtily, "When you introduce me to your parents, then we'll see." Robert's decision to talk to his parents was not easy. "Mom, Dad," when the moment was right, he said, "I have something to confess to you." "What is it?" "I have to tell you that Emily is not my fiancée. I lied to you." "What, not your fiancée?" Kathy was shocked by the message. "Then who is?" "I met her by accident. She scratched my car. Since she didn't have the money to fix it, I offered to help her out a little." "What kind of game are you playing?" Dad frowned. "I don't want to marry the girl you insist on marrying. In fact, I have a fiancée, and I love her very much." "Wait, so everything that's been going on here lately is a hoax, an act?" The mother looked at Robert in confusion. "And who is this girl really?" "Her name is really Emily. She really lives in the countryside, but she has a college degree. She is a veterinarian. But she pretended to be your fiancé for money. She did it to save her grandmother, not for profit. Her grandmother needed heart surgery, so we made a deal. She helps me, and I help her. Do you realize I said some pretty nasty things to her on the phone?" Kathy, pale as chalk, was furious with her son. "I accused the poor girl of God knows what, and I didn't even give her a chance to defend herself. What position have you put us in? For God's sake, tell me, how is she doing? I haven't seen her in a long time. But have you even tried calling her?" "Many times, but she doesn't answer and ignores my messages." "Why are you doing this, Robert?" Sebastian looked angrily at his son. "Couldn't you have come and told her you didn't want to get married?" "I couldn't." Robert was desperate. "You've been running around with that bride of yours like a piece of paper, praising her, telling everyone about your upcoming wedding. What would you say to me, Papa, if I came and said I didn't want to marry that girl? I wanted to marry this girl. Would you have listened to me?" I had to cheat, and you involved an innocent girl in your schemes. Anyway, now you know everything. I'd like you to meet my real fiancée, Kelly. She just got back from overseas. No way. Father cut me off. Stop us from making new acquaintances. You better deal with your fiancés first. Mom. Robert turned to her, looking for support. Father's right. Kathy said thoughtfully, when you're sure you're ready to marry her, you can bring her to our house. We don't want to witness any more of your love dramas, and we're not ready to get to know Kelly. Parents, I didn't expect this from you. Robert was desperate. Now he was afraid that Kelly would take offense at his refusal to introduce her to her father and mother. Now this topic is no longer discussed in our house. Sebastian said firmly. Robert thought how to explain himself to Kelly and was afraid of this conversation. However, the girl did not even ask when the meeting with her parents would take place. She, having returned to her homeland, immediately plunged into social life and completely captured the attention of the young man. Robert, the parents were offended. We do not see you at all. I have almost no free time. Justified the son. Kelly doesn't like to stay at home. We then in the club at midnight, then at a restaurant for dinner, and in the afternoon I work. I don't have much time to sleep, and there's no time to go out. She'll drive you crazy. Mother was worried. I really missed her. Robert smiled. Even a minute without her seems irretrievably lost. The young man was being sly. He did not want to admit that the relationship with his beloved was not so cloudless. Kelly, I'm so glad you're here, he said, admiring his bride. I'm glad too. She pouted her lips. But do you know what it cost me to cancel my contract? I've lost so much money, you can't even imagine. Darling, I'm prepared to reimburse you for all your losses. Ask for anything you want. Well, I don't know. She raised her eyes to the sky, showing that she was very concerned about the choice of gift. I've been wanting a new car for a long time. Mine is too simple for your fiancé status. You should be ashamed of yourself. She wagged her finger playfully and winked slyly at the young man. For having such an old model of car. Okay, let's go to the car dealership tomorrow and buy the one you want. Honey, Kelly squealed. You're such a sweetheart. I adore you. This is gonna be the best present ever. I'd forgive you anything for it. The next day they went shopping. I want this one. Kelly pointed her finger at an expensive SUV. Why do you need such a huge car? Robert tried to talk her out of it. Why don't we find you something more feminine? Just say you didn't have the money. Kelly folded her arms across her chest and turned away from her fiancé. She'd always been cranky, but she'd never disliked that behavior before. Now, however, Robert found himself increasingly annoyed by her petulance. He glimpsed the manager, his face devoid of any emotion, but with a sneer in his eyes. You gave $50,000 to some girl, and you spared me your fiancé. Why do I have to beg you for gifts? Explain. A real man never refuses his woman anything. Or maybe you've had enough of me. You know I'm not. Calm down, please. You don't have to make a scene here. I'll buy this car. If you like it so much, to please you, I'll take a star out of the sky. No offense. He kissed her on her cheek, which was blushing with annoyance, and nodded to the manager, who was watching the lovers with a nonchalant look. That evening they sat at a table in the restaurant and discussed the purchase. Honey, I'm so grateful to you for this regal gift. I've already posted a photo of the car on my social media page. I've never gotten so many likes before. The phone does not seize, they call, asking when it will be possible to ride on my Swallow. Listen, Kelly, I'm gonna need your help soon, interrupted Robert's enthusiastic exclamation. I have a dinner with a business partner in 3 days. He'll be with his wife, and I need your presence. Darling, can you hear me? He called out to the girl, who was deftly typing on her phone. What? She looked at the groom unhappily, reluctantly, breaking away from her occupation. Eh? No, sorry, I cannot. Aren't you at all interested in what I do? Honey, it's so boring. She wrinkled her nose and looked at the phone again. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to leave. Where? We haven't even had lunch yet. My agent texted me. Standing up from the table, Kelly said. There's a casting call coming up. I can't miss it. I need new contracts. Bye, sweetie. She sent him an air kiss and ran off. I think. The young man watched thoughtfully as his fiancée quickly got into the car, on the go, talking to someone on the phone. Kelly, all you need from me is money. She had changed a lot since returning home. She used to be interested in the firm's business. And her temper tantrums, no, we've had fights before, but somehow it doesn't irritate me the way it does now. It feels like she's playing a role, and it turns out it's not sincere. Can't she still forgive me for Emily? It's my fault, of course, but she should realize that this whole stupid situation with the fake bride is long over. That evening, Kelly called Robert and said, Honey, I'm ready to go out with your partner or whoever, but only on one condition. You give me a necklace. I bought a dress suitable for such a dinner, but my jewelry looks too plain with it. All right, the young man immediately agreed. We'll be sure to buy you a necklace. We'll meet at the jewelry salon tomorrow. My heart pricked unpleasantly. Emily would never put conditions on me. She would immediately agree to go with me. Stop. What am I thinking? The young man blushed involuntarily. How easy and simple everything was with Emily, how sincere and heartfelt she was. I had fun and freedom with her. I thought she even liked me. He involuntarily smiled, remembering the cute features of the girl's face, her long hair, simple dress, which sat well on her slender figure. The next day at the jewelry store, Kelly made another disgusted scene. This necklace will not go with your dress. The saleswoman patiently explained to the girl, You are thin, and on your chest jewelry will look bulky. Do you realize what you're saying? How dare you embarrass me in front of my fiancé? Who the hell do you think you are? You stupid, brainless chicken. Kelly was outraged. No, how insolent is that? Robert, she just insulted me, called me skinny, and said that the necklace doesn't fit me. Kelly, Robert said gently, trying to calm the furious bride. Why don't you look at another one? Just to compare. I think the salesman's right. I get it. Kelly glared angrily. You felt sorry for my money because I picked the most expensive necklace? And I didn't really want to buy anything from you guys. I don't want anything. And I'm not going to the appointment. Okay, that stupid sales girl just made me look stupid. But you, Robert, how could you question my taste? Can't I decide what kind of jewelry to match my dress? I'm sorry, my love. If you want, we can buy this necklace. The incident was over, but relations between the young people were getting worse. And more often at such moments, Robert thought of Emily and caught himself thinking that he missed her. Son, Kathy asked me one day, when are you going to introduce us to your bride? It's been so long. You don't say a word. Your father doesn't want to talk about it. And what can I do? I want grandchildren. Stop resenting each other. Are you and Kelly coming over for dinner tomorrow night? Kathy made sure the table was properly set. The cook has prepared a gourmet meal. What are you doing here? It's like we're hosting royalty. A model, what a profession. Sebastian was angry with his wife. I don't want to make a fool of myself, she told her husband. The girl lived abroad, accustomed to good cuisine. I wish I had hired a chef from the restaurant. However, our chef also knows a thing or two about food. That's my Kelly." Robert introduced his fiancée to the parents. The girl looked arrogantly at the owners of the house and gritted her teeth. "Hello, I thought you had a bigger house. Robert, he's been buzzing my ears about what a great house you have." "I think so." Sebastian replied discreetly. "There's plenty of room for everyone. But we're not going to live here anyway, are we, love?" She smiled at Robert. "I hope my future husband will buy a house for us. Can we go to the table now? I'm starving." Kathy replied confusedly. "Yes, come in. Everything's ready." Kelly looked at the table and sat down at the table. "I've lived abroad. They don't serve too many dishes. We didn't come here to eat. I can't eat too much. I have to keep in shape. I think it's very irrational to spend so much money on food. But I have men in my house," justified the hostess. "They are used to eating well. And you, dear Kathy." The guest remarked, "It would be good to look after your figure. After all age, it's time to think about your health." Kelly softly pulled her Robert. "You're being defiant." "What did I say?" She shrugged. "Every self-respecting woman should strive to keep young. That's abroad do not make a cult of food. They watch out for health and appearance." Kelly is right, of course. Barely holding back her tears, her mother said, "I do love to eat, and being overweight is ruining me. I actually think," the girl spoke again, "it's much better to have these dinners in a restaurant. No dishes, no hassle around the house. I'm not going to spend most of my life in the kitchen. Robert and I will eat at restaurants. Can't we talk about something else?" Dad broke the silence. "When are you getting married? We haven't talked to Kelly about it yet." Robert was embarrassed. "The wedding can wait." Kelly looked sternly at the groom. "I've signed a new contract, very favorable and promising for my career, and I'm not going to lose it." "What about the grandchildren?" Kathy asked shyly. "I was so dreaming that you would soon have a little one." "Oh," she waved her hands. "I don't even think about that. A baby would put an end to my modeling career." "No way. No kids while you're young. The age of the model is short. When I'm closer to 40, I can think about children, and in general, diapers, cradles, it's not for me." Kelly's cell phone screen suddenly lit up. She quickly read the message. "I'm sorry, but we have to go." She stood up. "Honey, will you walk me out? I've missed a lot already, you know." Sure. What are you talking about?" Lisa nodded. "Go, of course. Let John take you to the train or whatever it is you're going to do." "That's the point," said Molly. "Exactly how do you get there?" All of ours had already left, and I decided at the last minute. "It was a shame to leave you alone in the city like that, you know. That's why I can't get the tickets I need. Airplane tickets are too expensive, and the train tickets are all sold out. Would you mind if John gave me a ride to New York in his car? And from there are good tickets. I checked." "Of course. What are you talking about?" Lisa exclaimed. "Who would I be if I objected? You both care about me so much, of course you'll go. Then we'll say goodbye." Molly smiled. "We'd have to leave early tomorrow to make it on time. We'll leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, right, John?" "Sort of," agreed John. "And you, honey, sleep, don't worry. And don't forget to take your pills. They're good for you." The day when Lisa was left all alone, apart from the nurse and the kitten, was unusually nice and sunny. It was like an unplanned holiday in the middle of November. Lisa asked the nurse to take her out into the garden, sat in the sunshine, and breathed the fresh air. Then had breakfast at 11 o'clock as usual and went to the veranda to work while there was good light. And about an hour later, heard the noise of the automatic gate pulling away, surprised and alarmed. Had John and Molly really returned? Maybe they had forgotten something important, say, a passport, and would now be late for the train. But a completely unfamiliar car drove into the yard. Out of it came strangers, a woman and a man, and with them a small child. As if they were at home, they went to the front door of the house and opened it with a key. "Emily, Emily!" shouted Lisa to the nurse. "Emily, come here, for God's sake. Some strangers have come to our yard. Go ask them what they want." Emily left, and Lisa sat alone on the veranda again, listening to some lively dialogue between her and the strangers. She could hardly make out the words from the veranda, and here came the disturbed Emily, and with her the man who had come in the big unfamiliar car. "Good afternoon. Weren't you supposed to leave before today, as agreed?" "What do you mean?" "I don't understand, Lisa. What was the agreement?" "With whom? With the salesman, of course." The man chuckled. "We bought the house." "You bought the house?" Lisa's eyes darkened. "No, it can't be. This is some kind of terrible mistake. This is my house. I live here. I've lived here for a long time. The cottage belonged to my late father, then to me. But you sold it to us, didn't you?" The man pulled some yellow paper out of his bag. "Look at this. Your husband signed the contract for you with a power of attorney." "Read it, read it. You gave him the power of attorney." "I did." Lisa echoed. But I didn't think, I didn't know." "Listen to me. I had absolutely no intention of selling the cottage." She shrieked, finally realizing what was happening. John must have been deceived, missiled. Wait, I'll call him now." She pulled out her phone and pressed the call button. There was no dial tone for a long time, and then the cell phone operator announced, in the voice of a mindless mechanical robot, that the subscriber was not answering or temporarily unavailable. Not picking up the phone, probably communications out of the way. "They left this morning, John and Molly. You know Molly has a plane out of New York today," she said to the man who was standing beside her, looking around, looking bossy. "Mason, what's going on here?" His wife came in and also looked at Lisa with surprise. "And who are you exactly?" "I am the owner of this cottage," Lisa told her rather uncertainly. "You were sold it by mistake." "By mistake?" The woman became agitated. "By mistake, you say?" "Yes, I'll call the police." "What kind of mistake?" "This isn't a joke, my dear. Here's the deed, here's the register. This is our house now, so I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." "Leave?" Lisa was indignant. "But we're not going to live here anyway, are we, love?" She smiled at Robert. "I hope my future husband will buy a house for us. Can we go to the table now?" "I'm starving." Kathy replied confusedly. "Yes, come in. Everything's ready." Kelly looked at the table and sat down at the table. Where do you expect me to go?" "What do we care?" The woman smirked. "It's not our concern anymore." Shaking with terror, Lisa dialed Molly and John again and again, but could not reach them. Then, in utter despair, she called William. "Hello, William. It's Lisa. Yes. You know, I've had a terrible situation. Some strangers came and said I'd sold them the cottage, but I hadn't. John signed the contract by power of attorney. Someone must have cheated him. Probably the same people who came are kicking me out. Where am I going to go? Who will carry me to the cab, to the apartment? I don't even know who to turn to anymore. Could you come and take me to town? Please, I'll pay." William assured her that he would be there soon and asked her not to worry. and to tell the strangers that he would come and take her away within the hour. Another conversation. Nodded the newfound hosts. Wait, of course. What are we, some kind of fiends? And they left the veranda and started to carry bags and boxes from the car. Lisa sat in her wheelchair, swallowing tears and convulsively clutching her pale, skinny hands, breaking, crunching her fingers. "Emily, please," she asked the nurse. "Would you be so kind as to fetch me my pills?" "Yes, I know it's not evening yet, but I'm terribly worried, Emily. Bring them, please." After taking the pills, Lisa was able to breathe more freely. The pressure in her chest was gone, and her eyes no longer swam in dark circles. Her head cleared, her eyes grew heavy, and she practically fell asleep sitting in the chair. It seemed like only 5 minutes had passed and William had already arrived. "What's going on here?" he asked worriedly. "Come on, put your arms around my neck. I'll carry you to the car. Don't forget Trishka." Lisa got worried. He mustn't stay here alone. Trisha's loaded too. And Emily the nurse, who in the meantime had managed to collect some things Lisa needed and left for the city. At the apartment they got another unpleasant surprise. Lisa's keys did not fit the lock, which was shining with a new keyhole on the door, familiar from childhood. "What is it?" "I don't understand anything." Lisa cried out in despair. "What is it? Why can't I enter my own apartment?" "Calm down." William pressed the bell button. "We'll take care of it. What do you want?" An elderly woman, a complete stranger to Lisa, opened the door on a chain. "Who are you here to see?" "I live here." Lisa shouted and tried to reach forward in her wheelchair and grab the door with her hand, but William intercepted her just in time and put his foot through the gap. "Listen," he said to the... "Did you tell me everything?" The girl looked at David angrily. "And now tell your friend how you offered to deceive him and get a tidy sum for it." "What?" Robert was stunned. "David, what is she talking about?" "Oh, yes." The young man blushed. "I suggested that she call Emily and demand that she pay back what she owed. It's your own fault." He lashed out at his friend. "He gave some girl all that money. Kelly was your fiancée, but she couldn't even dream of that kind of money." "It's my family's money," Robert said, looking at David menacingly. "I decide what to do with it. She didn't tell you about the new SUV, about the diamond necklace I bought not too long ago. Was that not enough for her?" "No, she didn't talk about your gifts." The young man shrank under his friend's scornful gaze. "You know, I'm not even upset that you, Kelly, lied to me. Not only did you hide the fact that you lost your job and fell in love with someone else, you opened my eyes. And I'm grateful for that. Even ready to the plane ticket. Add the amount for rent for a month. Consider it compensation for not making a scandal at the breakup. But that's it. Let your lover support you now. Bye, guys." He got up from the table and headed for the exit. "Have a nice stay." "Robert, where are you going?" David asked him. "To a place where I am truly loved, not for money, just because I am me." The young man got into the car. All the way he smiled, imagining that soon he would hug his beloved. "Robert?" Emily jumped out into the street, noticing the familiar car. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," he answered simply. "What about your wedding?" The girl asked confusedly. "There will be one. You will marry me, won't you?" He took out of his pocket a ring of white and yellow gold, decorated with small diamonds, and put it on her finger. "It's only thanks to you that I realized what true love is. What about your fiancée? She's flying to her lover's house the other day. I'm not even angry with her because I never loved her. I got used to her. She was always there, bright, beautiful, but her beauty was false. You taught me to see a different kind of beauty, a soulful beauty. With you, it's like I've been cured of a serious illness. And now I stand before you and ask you to be my wife. Do you accept? Yes, I do. I love you. Emily threw herself on his neck, hugged him, and there was no need to hide her feelings. She looked at her chosen one with happy eyes. I love you. Robert leaned down and kissed the girl. Jenna looked at them from the window and smiled. The elderly woman crossed the young couple 3 times and whispered softly, God bless.